A very warm welcome from Delhi to the British Council and Artex Company Festival Connections and our second webinar, Lead, Govern, Scale, Repeat, now on a digital platform. My name is Jonathan Kennedy and I'm the Director of Arts with the British Council in India. We were overwhelmed by the response to last week's webinar and the many questions that were addressed online to the inspiring speakers, curated with British Council and Artex. We were joined by participants in India, Pakistan, Germany, Sweden, the UK, and Indonesia. So much so that we maxed out the Zoom audience capacity. So this week, we've increased the Zoom account so we're able to engage even more widely with artists and festivals in India, the UK, and internationally. And now I'm delighted to hand over to Barbara Wickham, Country Director for India at the British Council, for our welcome note. Over to you, Barbara.
Jonathan, there seems to be, there she is. Go ahead, Barbara.
Sorry, good afternoon. Slight delay given IT challenges in Delhi. So I'm Barbara and a very warm welcome from me as well. Festivals Connections is a key part of the British Council's holistic multi-year skilling and capacity development programme called Festivals for the Future, aimed primarily for emerging arts festivals, creative change makers, working alongside established festivals and arts leaders. I'm sure you know, but I'll say it anyway, that the British Council is the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and education opportunities. This mission is echoed in the ambitions for our Festivals for the Future programme, which includes a Festivals Academy, Festival Connection events, Festivals programming, India-UK connections through cultural grants, Festivals digital and creative economy research around arts and cultural festivals. Today, as Jonathan said, we're talking about festival governance models, transformational leadership, team structures and related business planning in the arts and culture sphere in India. We aim to be a catalyst for change, to build resilience, skills and networks through shared learning, mutual understanding and empathy between festivals in India and the UK. Today, as last week, we have a fabulously diverse range of knowledgeable festival directors presenting on their festivals from the India perspective, and arts management expertise joining us from the UK too. Really, this is quite a global event. Our presenters are in Chennai, Kolkata, Bangalore, here in Delhi, Mumbai and London, and we also have a speaker joining us from Sweden. Our speakers over the next couple of hours are from Ziro Festival of Music, Chennai Photo Biennale, Narada Gana Sabha, Jana Sanskriti Theatre of the Oppressed, Bangalore Litfest, Pickle Dance Foundation, and together they represent the abundant artistic innovation, social enterprise and community entrepreneurship in arts and cultural festivals that's so rich and alive in India. So welcome and thank you one and all. So why online? Really, as we're all experiencing, the rapidly evolving COVID-19 situation in India and beyond means that the health of our audiences, colleagues, partners and communities becomes our top priority in this time. And that's why we've taken all of our Festivals Connection event online. We understand this is a pretty difficult time for the creative sector and for artists and art professionals. Nevertheless, we really firmly believe that culture connects us, and at this time of uncertainty, creativity and collaboration bind us together. Now, at this time, this is more important than ever. So today, the British Council and ArtX are reaching out across digital frontiers, national boundaries, in solidarity with some inspiring arts festivals and actors in the creative sector in India and beyond. And so with that, welcome once more, and I'm delighted to hand over now to our lead host for the day, Rashmi Danwani, director of the fantastic ArtX company, who is with us in Mumbai. Over to you, Rashmi.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you again to the entire British Council team. I think about 3 weeks ago when we realized the situation was getting out of hand and it's not safe for us to have a live event, especially in the light of the fact that social gatherings was increasingly being frowned upon before the lockdowns came into force. We worked with the teams very quickly to pivot into this format, and we are very excited to have all of you here. I see that there are about 161 participants right now, so thank you for joining us. And a big thank you to the British Council teams, ArtX teams, and of course the speakers for pivoting with us. So I'll jump straight in. Delighted to have all of you with us, all 162 participants now. And a big hello to all of you who have joined us here for the second time. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as you enjoyed the first one, if not more. So I'll jump straight in by sharing some important information about what is going to come up and lay down some ground rules and some hygiene rules. Just to give you a little bit of a context, why is it that we've chosen this idea, this concept, this area thematic of leadership and governance? I think when we look at festivals, they come in all shapes, forms, and sizes. You've got everything from the Durga Puja to the Ganesh Utsav to a Jaipur Literature Festival, mega festivals, corporate festivals. They come in all shapes, forms, and sizes. And for us, it was important to understand what is the array of these festivals that are mushrooming in India. For the last 10 years, 15 years in particular, you've seen a huge amount of festivals in the community, and people from the sector taking up jobs in the festivals, and it's soon becoming a career choice. It was important for us, therefore, to understand who starts these festivals. They are started by artists who are initiating them, to fulfill a sort of creative vision. They are also started by corporations, by corporates who are marrying cultural capital with the passion of the CEO, the artistic passion of the CEO. And they are also started as policy mandates owing to the state government policies. So these are some of the models in which we were looking at festivals emerging. And we felt that over 15 years that we've seen this kind of very interesting growth in the private festival management space. It was important to understand, how do these festivals grow? How is it that the structure, systems, and processes are emerging and evolving over these times across social, cultural, and political dynamics? And a very important part of that is, how do these festivals grow and sustain themselves, and the roles that the governance structures play in that. So given that there was such growth that we were witnessing in festivals, it was really surprising for us when we looked around and found that there was very few case studies talking about how festivals are growing and they're built. There's enough information about the festivals, how to get your tickets, how to get to them, but not enough about what are the challenges people running the festivals are facing, how are they navigating them. And we didn't even know if there was adequate reflection on what are the changing roles and responsibilities and workflows of key team members in the festival. So when you have a festival that has a fundraiser, which was getting government money for the festival, how has that evolved over 10 years? So these are some of the questions we had, and we went to our industry experts from India and the UK with these questions. And we explored together, how can we delve into their practices around governance and leadership structures of these organizations. So what we have for you today is a fantastic array of speakers. As Barbara has already mentioned, they're literally from all over the world. Some of them not willfully, they're stuck there. Lubna in particular is stuck in Sweden at the moment. But what I did want to mention was to give you a sense of the kind of array of festivals we have. We have actually a festival from all three broad cultural genres. So we've got literary festivals, festivals from the visual arts space and the performing arts space. So we've got dance, we've got theater, we've got two music festivals, we've got literature, and we've got photography. So it's a really exciting array for us to look at. We also have 4 very distinct models of festivals, which we'll be unpacking as we go along. The first one being a founder-led festival. We've got a foundation-led festival, and we'll unpack these terms as we come along to these sessions. And 2 collective-led festivals and 2 community-led festivals. So just to see how each of these models take decisions and how they governed would be an interesting case study for us to look at, or case studies for us to look at. Unlike the last time, this session is mostly in English. I do also want to mention that we are deeply aware of the need of the hour, which is the COVID-19 crisis. And some of the questions that we are going to be asking in this session will be responding to the crisis. In fact, our first session by Tom Wilcox from the UK is focused specifically on how do we respond to the COVID-19 crisis. So that's it on the format and the content. A little bit about the structure of the next 2.5 hours. Each speaker is going to be speaking for about 10 minutes, after which there'll be 2 questions that will be asked to them, one by me as the moderator and my co-moderator, Jonathan Kennedy as well. And the other question that will be asked by you, the audience. You can see the Q&A box here. If one of our teams can just check, can ask a question on the box. I can see some of you have already asked questions. So these are the questions that will be answered by our panel here. Some of the questions will be answered live, which our teams will pick up, and I'll be asking the questions to our panelists. And some of the questions they'll answer after their session is over. So keep asking the questions. Last time, I think we had about 56 questions out of which we managed to answer about 50. So it's a very high chance that most of your questions will be answered. Note this is really important. If you have a question which is specific to a particular panelist, please put their name in your question. That'll be really helpful so they can address your question directly. And only use the Q&A tab. That'll be the easiest to work with. If you can ask specific questions in relation to their presentation while their presentation is on or soon after, that'll be nicer because you're able to then see the flow of the curation and how each model is being dealt with, but that's not a compulsion, that's just a piece of advice. For those of you who are unable to join us on Zoom, and you're watching this live via Facebook Live or through other platforms, you can ask us questions digitally as well through Instagram, through Facebook, through Twitter. Hashtag is Festivals for Future. Our teams will post it on the chat window, so you can look at that as well. If you can't log in online, if you want to send us some questions on email, please feel free to reach out to info@art-x.co. Again, you will see that information posted on chat in about a second. And this questioning is not going to end here. We're going to continue this conversation online, particularly because all of us are going to be online for some time to come. So please do tag us at British Council India, at the Art Exco, and use the hashtags Festivals for Future and Festival Connections so that we can track your queries and address them online as well beyond the webinar. With that, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Tom Wilcox. Tom is a senior partner at Counterculture. He was supposed to actually have been leading the British Council's Festivals Academy, which was supposed to have been in Kochi earlier this month. Unfortunately, we couldn't have him, but we look forward to having you here in person, Tom, soon, hopefully soon. But what is most exciting is that we were back and forth this week talking about his session, and we felt that we need to look at the COVID-19 crisis. So Tom very kindly agreed to address the need of the hour and rework his talk to present the UK perspective on leadership and governance in times of the COVID-19 crisis and its impact on cultural work. Before I hand over to Tom, I want to let you know that I'll be introducing briefly the speaker and the context of his session. You can read more about Tom again in the chat box. The full bio is there. Please take a look at it. Over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Very kind, Rashmi. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this conference with everyone. Many festivals and other arts organisations are now facing an economic emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many are going to have to fight for their survival. Festivals are being cancelled or postponed, commercial income is reduced, fundraising has been made more difficult, and these are tough times. So how can boards and management of festivals respond to this? The COVID-19 pandemic is a test of leadership. Organisations with strong governance, management, systems and procedures, as well as those that embrace creativity and innovation, are most likely to survive. A positive approach would be to embrace the limitations of the situation and, in some ways, perhaps even use this opportunity to make your name and that of your organisation. The Shakespeare quote seems very apt at this time from As You Like It. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in the head. So in all adversity and all difficulty, there are always great opportunities. And the cultural sector, the arts sector, is better than most at exploiting those and taking advantage of them. So I'm going to talk through my top 10 list of approaches, business approaches to dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. And the first one is never waste a good crisis. These are challenging times, and they're an opportunity to make positive changes to your organisation, such as to cease or alter off-mission and excessively costly activities. If there are things that you've wanted to change in your organisation for some time, but there's been stakeholder resistance or it's been low on the list of priorities, this is now an opportunity to make those changes in the context of the crisis and to see them through. And as such, the organisations that do survive and come out the other end of similar events, not that we really have experienced very many exactly similar events in our careers, but those that do survive can come out stronger at the other end. Tip number 2 is to form a war cabinet. And what I mean by this is an emergency working group based around senior management, supplemented by input from other colleagues across the organisation where appropriate. Report key dilemmas and decisions to the board regularly and try to create consensus about what you're doing to respond to the crisis. But it's very important not to fear disagreement, as some people will continue to fight for their own agendas, even in the face of an existential threat. Check existing insurance policies, if applicable, for any loss of income clauses, and create a list of assets that could be quickly converted into cash if possible. Number 3, be decisive. It may be necessary for cultural organisations to make hard or even ruthless decisions to survive. No one will thank you for bankrupting your organisation later by avoiding difficult decisions now. After all, Joni Mitchell said, "We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back in the garden." It really is a time for very decisive action, and in some cases, deferring a difficult decision will end up with more negative results than making one early. Number 4, make necessary cuts quickly. Reduce as much expenditure as possible, as early as possible, without unduly affecting your organisation's reputation or creating a false economy whereby reinvestment is required to restart full activities in a few months' time. Do not let vested interests within the organisation stop you from doing what's necessary to ensure it doesn't disappear. And again, the great quote from Mr. Micawber from Charles Dickens' David Copperfield comes to mind here. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £19, 19 shillings and sixpence. Result happiness. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £20, ought and 6, result misery. Number 5, cash is king. Prepare detailed weekly or daily cash flow forecasts. People working in festivals will be used to working in very difficult cash flow situations, so this is familiar to almost all of you, I'm sure. But if you have to stop paying suppliers if you can pay suppliers at the last point allowed by your credit terms with them, do so. I'm not sure if checks still exist as a form of payment in India, but in the UK, resorting to paying for checks rather than paying people online, although it's not a great thing to do, it wouldn't be considered a great thing to do by your suppliers. It does give you 1 or 2 weeks extra cash flow if you absolutely need it. And the final point is spend more time on credit control, collecting debts, than you would normally do. Number 6, communicate clearly and regularly with all stakeholders. Create a compelling narrative about what you're doing during the COVID-19 crisis, and in particular, the rationale for difficult decisions you have to make. Show empathy for anyone affected by your decisions, and emphasize the overreaching imperative of the company to continue to exist. I have a client, a festival client in the UK, and their festival is in June every year. They're having to cancel it and move it to the autumn, move it to September or October, and they're going to have to scale down the festival. They're going to have to make it less of a participative community exercise. They're going to have to do it in a different venue. All of those things have implications for artists and audiences and stakeholders and funders. But the way they've been at pains to explain that very clearly, the rationale behind it, and everyone's understood it, and it's been a very successful communications message. So they've managed the comms crisis around that so far. Number 7, safety first. Exercise particular care not to prejudice the health and safety of your staff, visitors and others. This necessitates acting quickly on advice and putting steps in place ahead of and along with developments in the spread of the virus. And in particular, I think that the real challenge we're all going to face is knowing when the right time to resume activities is. You know, when can we reschedule a festival for? When can we resume any community or education activities we have? When can we start to meet with colleagues? And I think there'll be two levels to this at least. There'll be governmental advice, but there'll also be what's appropriate for your organisation and our sector. Difficult judgment to make. Number 8, and this relates really to the cash flow point I made earlier. Speak to existing funders, donors and sponsors. They may potentially agree to make forward payments of grants and donations that they've already committed to. They may agree to help your cash flow. Arts Council England in the UK has just announced a large scheme that's related to COVID-19 as a way of supporting organisations. I think in addition to that, they're also looking to pay organisations they fund earlier on. I know the funding system is entirely different in India and elsewhere, but if you do have commercial sponsors, corporate sponsors and private donors who have already made a commitment to you, it may be worth discussing with them whether or not they could pay you earlier if you do have particular cash flow problems relating to this crisis. Step 9 is be aware of all government initiatives to assist with financial hardship and take full advantage of them. Every government in the world will be having some kind of fiscal stimulus and assistance for people. In the UK, it doesn't particularly help the arts sector any more than it does any other sector. There are no particular measures that are specific to the arts sector, but there are fiscal stimulus packages, and all arts organisations will have to make the most of them. I'm not sure what's likely to be in place in India and elsewhere, but just be aware of them and use them to your full advantage. And number 10. Abandon yesterday, which is an idea from the thinker Drucker, the strategic thinker. What activities and practices that the organisation carries out can be jettisoned or changed? Be creative and find innovative ways to reduce financial exposure. This idea that you find yourself running an organisation, a festival, and there are many practices and ways of working that are idiosyncratic to you and have been evolved over a long period of time. In my career, I was managing director of Whitechapel Gallery, and it'd been there 100 years before I joined it. And in that time, it developed all these particular ways of working. And actually, unless you stopped for a moment and said, hold on, you know, if we were starting this organisation again, which of these practices would we keep, and which of them would we completely abandon and start again? And a crisis is a very good opportunity for a tabula rasa, wipe the slate clean, and take the best bits and abandon all of the bad practice and the out-of-date practice and the things you just don't want to be doing anymore where they are. So, in summary, the more innovative, the more creative, and the more robust that you can be in managing your organisation through this crisis, the more likelihood there is that you'll be able to survive it. When I worked at, well, this is a slight distraction from the music business, but something I used in running the ICA in London. I joined and it was just about to go bankrupt and disappear. And we used oblique strategies, which is a set of instructions on cards developed by the musician Brian Eno. And they would throw out sometimes quite random suggestions about how to approach a particular situation in music. And we tried using those in a management sense, just to try and think of more innovative solutions to resolving problems. I wish you all good luck with this process of dealing with the crisis.
Thank you so much, Tom. I think that was extremely insightful. This is exactly the kind of questioning that we've been on. And, you know, we at ArtX and Arts Culture Resources India actually have been talking to several sector stakeholders. And some of the points that you mentioned is exactly what we've been talking about here as well. But to see it in this frame and structure is really helpful. My first question to you, Tom, in particular, and I'm going to pick up on a couple of other themes that you've also brought up, is the fact that in the arts we're expected to be agile. You know, we improvise, we're agile, and particularly in India where we don't have structured support from the state the way you have with Arts Council England. But here the situation is changing by the minute. You know, we thought we could postpone our British Council Festival Connections event. I mean, I don't know what we would do if we would have postponed it. Thankfully, we chose the webinar route, but the situation is changing by the minute. You know, we are 2 days ago, we were asked to lock down for 3 weeks. We don't know what's going to happen. Much of our work is performance driven, it's audience driven. So while those 10 suggestions are amazing, how is it that you would expect an arts leader to prioritize what to do first? You know, also maybe a couple of examples of maybe a smaller organization and a slightly larger organization. How would you expect them to respond, and what is the most important thing to prioritize now? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question and a very difficult one. I think it's counterintuitive for arts leaders, people who are specialists in their art form, not to put the art first. You know, and what's so dynamic and interesting about our sector is the passion for making and presenting great art. And I think, you know, actually this is one of those very rare times where the survival of the organisation and the ability to make and present great art for years to come afterwards is more important than any short-term considerations around that. So I would encourage, you know, curators and programmers and artistic directors and people in that side of the business to be as hard as they can in the short term and make those sacrifices around programming and so on in order to help survive in the long term. And that's, I don't think I've ever advised that generally in my career. It feels counterintuitive to do that. I think for larger organisations, it's sometimes harder to make these adjustments because they have a larger infrastructure. They have it's harder to stop their activities, and also they have often organisations that have existed for some time and become larger organisations have the weight of history on them. You know, they're important. They may have had key artistic directors over various points of time in their history, and they're carrying that legacy. So the responsibility to survive is somewhat more harder for them. For essentially individual artists who have developed small-scale organisations around their own practice, it's much easier to respond to that by stopping doing work and perhaps even deciding to do something else for a while or making other more flexible options. But large cultural organisations which have lots of staff and a building and fixed plans find it very hard to respond to this. But I would just stress again that the earlier you make decisions to do something about this, the more benefit those decisions will have.
So you're essentially saying don't get cold feet, take one step at a time and respond. I think the first step is to respond and figure out what out of these 10 should you be picking up relevant to your size, scale, need of the hour. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. There's one thing to look out for though, and I've seen this in other crises before, is that sometimes the steps that are taken to respond to the crisis end up costing more money and more time to fix those steps after the crisis than it would have done if they'd have been kept in place. So, you know, I remember in 2008, during that crisis, I remember an arts organisation just firing a whole department immediately to save money. And actually, in order to carry on being funded and to have an audience, they needed to restate them later at great cost. So it was very short-sighted and a false economy. So be decisive, but be smart with it.
Yeah, yeah. And especially for us in the arts, human resource is the most important thing. So how, to prioritize that is extremely critical.
Absolutely.
I think there's some interesting questions that are coming up. I'm just going to pick one from them. There's an anonymous attendee who's asked, Tom, do you feel physical festivals will be at all possible in the coming 1 year that we have, with the economy going for a nosedive soon as predicted? So I think it's just more of a predictive response from you.
Well,
Yeah.
that's. I wish I knew. That's a discussion I'm having with many of my clients at the moment. I sincerely hope so, because it's one thing not to have any live art for 3 or 6 months. It's quite another thing for a year. And many of my clients won't survive a year, but they will survive 6 months. So I sincerely hope so. But I mean, I don't know. Let's see. I mean, something positive though to hang on to is that when people come out of lockdown and the economy starts to slowly get back into gear and to be moving again, people will be absolutely desperate to engage with culture and art. So I do think we'll have a rush of activity and people going to festivals, going to the theatre, going to music gigs. And I think that period could actually last some months. So there is an upside, but it's all around really the question of timing and when it's safe for mass gathering again. I can see a situation where we're all allowed to go to work and out of our houses, but we're not allowed to congregate 1,000 people in a room watching a concert. So I think the devil's in the detail there, but there may be an upside.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Tom. I can see several questions have come up for you. I'm gonna move on to our next speaker, but please do answer some of the questions. I think they're very relevant as well. Thanks again, Tom. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you.
So that was Tom for us, some very valuable and useful insights there. Now let's look at the Indian cultural festival scenario. I think it'll be interesting to unpack some of that as we are going through the next 6 festivals that we have for you. Starting with Vikram Iyengar, all the way from Kolkata. He's the founder and director of the Pickle Factory Dance Foundation. Vikram is an artist as well, a dancer. He used to run this wonderful dance company called Ronan. I remember I first saw his beautiful work on Macbeth at the NCPA several years ago. But about 2 years ago, Vikram started Pickle Factory Dance Foundation, and they've had 2 seasons so far, but a lot of unpacking that he's done. So over to you, Vikram.
Thanks a lot, Rashmi, and hello everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so people can see stuff. Okay, so specifically I've been asked to really talk about the Pickle Factory season and how that actually factors into the larger vision that the Pickle Factory has. So to start with, what you're seeing on your screens hopefully is the homepage of the Pickle Factory website, and the images that you're seeing scrolling by are mainly from Pickle Factory season 2, which was in November, December last year. But since I'm going to be talking about the season in relation to what the Pickle Factory is and hopes to be, we're only 2 years old. We're really quite young. So I just want to sort of explain to you what the beast is to begin with. So the Pickle Factory Dance Foundation, it's a hub for the practice, discourse, and presentation of dance and movement work. It's housed in spaces repurposed for the arts. And it's a space to think, meet, know, talk, imagine, dance. So I've given you the who, the what, the why, the where. And there are specific reasons for all these things, but coming from an artistic practice myself, it really came out of a felt need as a dancer and a member of the dance and movement community in India, that we don't really have a home to call ours. And it's about time in a country like India, where there are so many movement forms, that you have a home that actually pushes the many futures that we can go towards. It actually catalyzes that to happen. What is this home? So the big dream for the Pickle Factory is actually a permanent venue in a repurposed space in Calcutta. It's a permanent venue that is local, national, and international, and part of a network of vibrant artist-led spaces. And this thing about being artist-led is also really vital. We do put the artist absolutely at the center. It really directs almost every decision that we take. So we are about, I've changed the screen. I hope the screen has changed for you. To recap, we are about the city and city spaces. We are about the citizens who are our audiences, and we are about the artists and their practice. Now, all these are defined very, very, very broadly. And the permanent venue, when we have it, we don't have it at the moment, the permanent venue will bring all these things together under one roof, and the intention is to transform our experience of both movement and space. So how does the season actually fit into this? The season is basically a snapshot of everything that could conceivably be under this roof. So what's there on your screen right now is an overview of Pickle Factory Season 1, which was in February, March 2018. That was our inauguration. That was how we announced ourselves. You have some statistics and things on the screen, but what you also have is a whole range of people that we worked with. So it's really important for us to work in partnership with many people, because we are about building that community that really is able to sustain something growing like this. Now, when we began, Pickle Factory Season 1 was literally run by 3 people. We dived into it head first. It was very intuitive. It was very artist-led. In a way, it's how I would go into a studio to make work as an artist. You have some ideas, you have some structures, and you sort of go into the studio to see what emerges, what can happen. Some things work, some things don't, and you discover things as you go along. And that was very much how we did Pickle Factory Season 1. Very organic, very fluid. We did have a band of volunteers come and help us do the festival part, which was at the end of the season. Between Season 1 and Season 2, we have become slightly more structured, hopefully. We have asked ourselves very, very specific questions. And when we did Season 2, we were a little more focused and organized in terms of the personnel we had, the resources we had, and we had to get all of these things. They don't drop in your lap in India. And we asked ourselves also very specific questions for curating the second season. And we called it Widening Circles. It was about the diversity of the dance and movement field, not just the diversity in terms of what it includes, but also the diversity in terms of where the range of work, the range of venues and spaces where it can be seen, and the range of communities who we can involve to actually be part of this. So that on your screens right now is the Pickle Factory Season 2 poster, and the list of names at the bottom is not just a list of artists who took part, but also includes all our guests. So people who work with audience facilitation, people who work with talking about repurposing spaces, people who are running workshops on arts management, or how do artists manage their own lives, that sort of thing. So that's what I mean when I say it's a season and not a festival. A festival is focused around performance, around workshops, around artist interactions, and it has many other things as well. But a season, our season, the first one was 5 weeks, the second one was 7 weeks. But actually in the second one, in terms of performances, we only had 8 featured artists. And then a lot of other things, including a residency, including different kinds of workshops, which are not necessarily to do with practice happening. And that's the range that we really want the Pickle Factory permanent venue to have. Pulling back to structure, how we started, we set up officially in 2017 July with just 2 designated official people. Ruchira Das, who's the co-director on the Pickle Factory, she also runs her own arts organization, Think Arts in Calcutta, catering to young audiences, and myself. That's the minimum you need to set up a Section 8 company, which we are. And we really decided that we are not going to be top heavy in admin. That was the first organizational decision that we took. We do have a core group of people that's morphed since we first started talking about it. At the moment, after Season 2, we have an administrator, someone who looks after product management, someone who's looking after production management. But our roles are very, very interconnected, and we work very much as a team. Very amorphous, very blurred, our lines, but at the same time try to keep clear focus. Around us, again, since season 2, there's another group that's developed, which we called picklers. And picklers are people who, they may have joined us as volunteers. They may have attended an event or a program and found that, oh, this is something I really want to be part of. I want to throw my weight behind this. And they've come on board to create this very close second circle. So this is what I mean by organic and fluid. It's not a stated goal that we had to have a second group around us when we started season 2, but this has happened. And it then enables us to brainstorm. It enables us to ask, what are we going to do? Who are we going to do it with? Why are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? And very importantly, who is going to lead it? And how are we going to collectively own this space that we're creating? It is really about creating a community that believes that something like this is necessary for the city, for the country, and for the community at large, whether in India or whether elsewhere. So this thing of longevity is something I really want to stress. As Rashmi mentioned, I also have a performance company, Ronon, and there it's very individual led. It's about me and my work. And tomorrow, if I get run over by a bus, even though no buses are running at the moment, that company dies with me. But with Pickle Factory, even though it is founder led, it cannot be individual led in the same sense. It needs to have built into it the intention and therefore the seeds of how it is going to go towards longevity, how it is going to go towards continuity, how the idea itself is going to be the thing that people want to advocate for. Speaking of advocacy, since the beginning that about 6 or 7 years ago when we started talking about this idea, we've had a close-knit set of what we call advisors, but they are not officially designated as such. That's another decision that we took. We do not have an official board. We do not have an official board of advisors at this moment in time. But we do have these people who are advising us and helping us along because they believe it needs to happen. And these people are mostly from arts festivals, literature, performing arts, cultural houses. We do know that this is a circle that we need to diversify if we're now looking at going to the next stage. We need people from finance, from law, from city planning, from PR, in order to go to the next step. Now, just to bring it all back to a texture for Pickle Factory, we really do want to continue down this road of being fluid, being organic, making sure that that remains as much as we also formalize our structures. And this comes really out of, coming right back to me, this comes out of what you're seeing on your screens now is a Venn diagram that I sent through to someone I was beginning a mentorship relationship with. And he asked me, what does your world look like? So this is what I sent to him. And you can see there's something in the center, there's something around it, and there are things pulling in different directions. After my first meeting with him, I had an aha moment, and this is what I then came up with, a sort of electron system, a 3D system, a more dynamic planetary system, which really has the ability to have multiple relationships with itself, how it sees itself, how it changes itself, depending on what needs to be foregrounded. And you actually have less writing in the picture, but you have a very clear core, and the clear core says connecting forms, people, cultures, places, practices, and ideas. And really in the dance and movement space, that's what we want Pickle Factory to be. And so every decision we take about governance, about structures, about who we invite on board to create this space with us, who stays with us for what duration of the journey, really is response to this structure of flux, but also structure of extreme clarity, because we know which direction we are going in. And again, coming back to an artist's self, that's very often how you go into the studio. You know where you're going, you just don't know how you're going to get there. So it's very different from a very clear strategic laid out plan. We are discovering things as we go along, and you pin those down as you discover them. I just want to close by sharing with you the recap video of Pickle Factory season 2. So you get a sense of, again, bringing it back to the season, what it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Vikram. I get particularly excited when I see handwritten notes and mind maps. So that was, and thank you for sharing that with us as a piece of your little diary. Also, when I saw it, I've seen your presentation before, but it's this connection that makes it more real, and to see where that is. Just a couple of things that came through very strongly in your presentation. I think one had to do with the fact that you have obviously had a very clear vision, which is what seems to be driving it, and that vision is a part of your structure, which is a great thing to see. But the other thing that you spoke about was moving from founder-led to not individual-led. Let it, and that I thought was an interesting term to pick up. Not individual-led, and what does that mean? That means that you're bringing in the right kind of people and the right kind of strengths to ensure that the idea of pickle factory dance foundation exists beyond you and sustains beyond you. However, I think, how do you balance that kind of longevity with the hat that you wear of an artist, and the organic, fluidity that you bring to the process, and the very rich perspective that you bring to the process? So my question actually to you is that, how do you balance wearing these two hats, the abandon and the vision that the artist brings in, along with the structure that the CEO has to bring in? And if you could answer that using an example of maybe an issue that you dealt with, or something positive and where you use both hats, I think that would be quite helpful because a lot of people start festivals because they're interested, and artists start festivals in India. So this would be an interesting process to sort of think about.
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question. I think the first thing that I would say, and I have discovered over the last, not so long ago, is that the first mistake we actually make is that we think of it as two hats. And what I think is, for me at least, what is more helpful is to think of an and space rather than an or space. So it's about how do these fluidly inform each other and therefore make each other richer, rather than, oh, now I'm wearing this hat and now I'm wearing that hat. Having said that, I think what an artist approach brings to a more, if you want to call it that, a CEO kind of approach. I don't think CEO is a term that many artists would be comfortable with in India, at least. I think it's about attitude, and it's about bringing in play and fun, and taking risk, being okay to take more risk than you normally would, because that is what we do as artists. We take a lot of risk, and we take creative risk. That does not mean that we are being foolhardy. It means that a gut instinct is telling us that this is a risk that you should take rather than this one. And then, of course, in hindsight, your CEO self should be, after the thing is done, should be actually analyzing that and saying, okay, what worked, what did not work, how much was the gut right, and how much should we not have done it. So those are the ways that you need to balance it, that you can't say, oh, this is what we're going to do because it feels right, and just do it, and not have that analytical side of things, which is actually going to say, okay, now we've done it, but now let's really sit back and talk about it and pull it apart to see what we've learned. Because the thing about any fluid structure like this is not to be constantly fluid. That's not what I'm saying. It's not to be so amorphous that it becomes nebulous, but to discover things and pin them down. So as you discover things that, oh, this worked, this is something that we need to now formalize, now detail a little more, because this is something that has been responded to and responded to well. Here is something that was not so good, but there is potential. Let's see what we can do with it. So to have those responses going at the same time. I think as an artist, something that an artist can teach a CEO is to be okay when things don't go anywhere. There is value in that as well, that you've done something, we've created something, and it hasn't led to something. It hasn't had an immediate impact in whatever way you measure impact. That's fine. Someone somewhere has learned something, and that is extremely valuable coming from an artist. Also, as an artist, the roles that you can play are extremely varied. The conversations you can have, the people that you can talk to, what level you're talking, what you're talking to them about can vary. Especially in India, being an artist means that you're at the same time extremely specialized, but also jack of all trades, because when we're producing work, we're doing every bloody thing ourselves. we don't have producers to bring in the money. We don't have agents who are going to book our tours. We don't have any of those things. So as artists, we are multiple natured, and that is something that not just the CEO, I think those are the kinds of people that Pickle Factory or organizations like Pickle Factory would like to draw to themselves, to have people who come because they feel that, okay, this is my strength, but I can also contribute in A, B, C, D places and nothing else. So that's what I mean by a fluid structure that really has multiple relationships with itself.
Thank you so much for that, Vikram. There's one audience question here which I'd like to pick up from, I think this is by Melissa from Arts Nexus. She has shared, apart from praising your program, which you can look up later, she says that how festivals can consider experience dance in a digital format. Would it have the same connection to the audience? And I think it's also pertaining to what we're seeing right now. So what would be your response to that?
Well, hi, Melissa. Melissa was part of season 2. So just putting that out there, she did the arts management workshops and several other things. So that's not something that Pickle Factory has actually done so far, to do dance or movement-based stuff on a digital platform. But obviously, in this situation, we are talking about it. We in fact had a conversation about it in the core team yesterday, and we are in talks with somebody to plan something that will launch next week, and we don't know how it's going to pan out. We don't know what the response is going to be, but the thinking at the moment is to make it not about watching a performance, but really about engagement. And how does one ensure that an online engagement, apart from writing comments and saying, oh, how lovely, oh, blah, 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 etc., like that, but how do you become an active audience online is going to be key to how we structure things. It's also going to be short. It's going to be asking the artists to really ensure that how they structure their presentation touches on several things. So there must be performance, there must be an element which invites certain kinds of participation from the people who are watching it online. And there must be a portion of it where the artist is actually addressing you directly. How this is going to pan out, we don't know yet, but this is something we're going to try. Responding to the question that was asked to Tom, I also sincerely hope that we don't continue in this vein only for too long a time. I think it's an opportunity to discover this kind of work, to discover this kind of platform and kind of engagement. But it would be a real pity if we lost the liveness of it. Yeah, it's a concern that I think a lot of artists are feeling, that yes, we're doing stuff online in India. Definitely a lot of artists are putting their work online and available freely. And I think that's something we need to take note of, that how are we getting through. A friend of mine, Ranjana Dave, who many of us probably know, has put on Facebook today that let's be cognizant of the fact that we are sitting at home, and what is helping us get through this time is engaging with the material that artists are putting online, whether it's things to read, whether it's artwork, whether it's videos of them making music or making dance or whatever it is. And really to be aware of that when we come out of this, and not say, oh, we don't have the money to support the arts anymore because of economic crunch or whatever it is. Yeah. Arts is what makes the world go round at the moment, and really in general as well.
To invite Srikrishna Ramamoorthy, he's here with us. He is the co-founder of the Bangalore Literature Festival. It's been on since 8 years now, and the 9th edition being in November 2020. I'm very excited to present this festival as the literature festival from our season. So over to you, Srikrishna, and watch out for his very exciting background. Over to you.
Thanks. Really good to be here. And I was mentioning to Rashmi and team yesterday in my day job. I've been on Zoom pretty much all day for most parts of this week. So it's just interesting how one wouldn't have thought that something like this would come about, but here we are. Let me just share my screen as we get going, and all right. One second. Okay. So yeah, just really good to be here. Thanks to British Council and Artex for putting this together. I attended the webinar last week as well, and it was a good opportunity for me to learn quite a bit from just what other folks are doing. I'll maybe spend the first 2 to 3 minutes just giving folks a sense of really who we are, and I'm not going to read what's on the screen, but a lot of this came about for us in 2012, at which point Jaipur was, I think, in their fifth or sixth edition or so. I think it started to become really big, but there really wasn't any other Lit Fest anywhere else in the country, and we thought that this could actually be, an interesting way to get readers and writers together in Bangalore. We didn't really look at this as something that would cater to folks from outside the city, but over time now, it sort of has evolved into a bit of a destination. So we do have folks coming from elsewhere, but predominantly, this is something that is focused on the audiences within the city, maybe nearby. We've had a good run until now. We started quite small, and I think it really. I don't think the founding team and the rest of us in the team really thought that it would become this big, but quite pleased with the fact that it has over time now. And I think we're also proud that we've had some interesting things along the way that we've been able to put in, because a constant thought for us ends up being, look, you could follow the traditional format that most literature festivals or other folks do, which is bring 3 people onto a panel or 4 people onto a panel, get them to talk to each other. I mean, obviously put a moderator in and then allow for some Q&A. But after a point, we've continuously thought about what are ways we could be doing, what are things we could be doing to innovate and push on that front. So the last bullet point that you see there, Litmart, I think is quite pleased that that's a bit of an innovation that came from the Bangalore Literature Festival, where we said we're seeing so much of an audience. We're seeing publishers come in as well. Could we look at putting aspiring authors in a room with publishers and agents and actually getting them to pitch their book idea, almost like if you were a startup and you had an idea and you pitched to a venture capital fund. And no better place than Bangalore to think of things like this. So that's something that's unique. Just a long list of folks that have come and been part of the festival each year. A smattering of folks from outside of India, within India, and Bangalore and the region. We've not necessarily had as many international authors. Of course, budgets and all of that in the early days playing a role there. But at this point in time, I think we are sought after. We're seeing a lot of folks really reach out to us fairly early on and say that, hey, we've heard a lot of good things about what you guys are doing. Would love to be a part of your next edition type of thing. So that's on. And then the other piece, which again, going back to what I was saying just a little while ago on looking at what else is it that we should be doing as a Lit Fest, we've consistently made sure that we've brought in a fair bit of programming for children, young adults, and teens into what we do. Primary logic when we actually started to think about it was really to say, hey, if you want to bring larger numbers of older folks and parents, then let's get the kids. If you've got something going for pretty much the entire day for kids, then sure enough you'll have parents showing up as well. So that's really what's transpired behind that. And then typically on the evening, so we've we started off with being a 3-day festival, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're now more a 2-day festival, and both evenings usually we've had a music performance. So that's something that both the authors who are coming in and the speakers enjoy. It's also a nice way to wind things down. So just a little note there. I talked a little about Litmart. Quite pleased with actually how this has played out. We've had 4 books come through from 4 books get published at this point, and we're hopeful that we'll see more of those. And for this edition of the festival, we're actually starting to think of expanding this into some other very interesting genres as well. So I'd ask folks to stay tuned for that. I think the biggest, when someone asks us really what's different about you guys versus any other literature festival in India, I think it's the fact that we're citizen funded. We tried a little bit on the corporate sponsor route in year 1, It came with a lot of challenges, baggage, and I think expectation mismatch. And we one of our, and then going back at one of the things I will talk about is just governance and what role our advisory board has played. I think really a key role that our advisory group, and in particular a gentleman, Mr. V. Ravichandar, who's one of our key advisors. This was the idea that really he and a few of us on the team came out with, saying let's actually reach out to folks in the city and say, could you contribute, donate essentially to see this festival through. Our budgets were smaller when we got going, but we're actually quite grateful that as our budgets have increased year after year, the donations that folks have given us have also gone on. We're set up as a non-profit trust with all the exemptions, so there is a benefit for someone that's willing to donate. So in year one, when we took this approach, it was primarily because, look, we said, we don't see this flying yet with corporates, so maybe it may take some time. Let's wait and watch. So until then, let's do this. But soon we saw that there's actually a lot of positives to why we choose to be in this way. So the group of donors that we call them the Friends of the Festival. Just little context really on what is it that they do and how it works. But we started to see that the big advantage that we get from something like this is the fact that you can be completely neutral. You don't, no logos at all except the festival logo, and that really makes for a statement. We've had a number of authors and even movie stars actually comment on the fact that, hey, we walked around the venue and we see that there's actually not a single logo. How are you actually able to pull it off? And there's just a really high level of involvement, not just from the folks that are contributing each year, but also everyone really that is part of the community when they know that, hey, this is really our festival and all of us are making this happen. And so it's worked out really well for us on all of those fronts. Because there are challenges that come with it, in the sense that there's sometimes there is donor fatigue, and you hit a point where it could end up being a leaky bucket, because people are at different times, at points in time, getting hit up by a variety of causes. So you have folks that don't necessarily support us year on year, but come back later or say, look, I'm fully tied up with my commitments for this year because of other things. And so we're also constantly looking for widening that donor base as well. But that's a little, I think this really stands out as unique for us. And yeah, so I think I went over this. So I'll jump into a few things that are, I think, relevant to this conversation around really, how do we look at governance? How is having and what's the team like, and all of that. So first up, all of us on the team, and you see a photograph of us right there. All of us are pro bono, and all of us have day jobs, which is not the literature festival. Shaheen, who's the festival director and one of the co-founders, she's a writer and columnist. And each of us, Vikram's a storyteller, used to have a tech job, gave that up, and now does a bunch of other things. So each of us have day jobs, and that's what we do. But the way it works is we've been able to integrate the festival really into our daily lives effectively. So for most of us, this ends up being sort of two jobs. You've got a full-time job and you've got this going, because while the festival pops up for 2 days a week at some point in the year, work goes on through the year. So that's one. I think second, we've had an advisory board from inception. We said this will help for a variety of things. One, clearly, like I mentioned, it's helped a lot with fundraising. Second, it's helped us navigate tricky situations whenever we've encountered this. So I'll give you an example. In 2019, the day we were opening the festival, the city had, the authorities had decided that they would enforce, or the previous evening, they enforced Section 144 across the city. And so now you're just scrambling to figure, how do you actually navigate this? And I think there it really helps to have advisors that come with a level of eminence, that have networks that can actually give you the right kind of information when and access that and give that to you when information is not all that easily available. And if you've decided to take a call on, hey, we're actually not calling off the festival, let's go on, because if you interpret the rule in a way you want to, you've got someone that's willing to back you and stand by you when it's a situation where the chips are down. So I think from those from a standpoint of all of that, it's really helpful. Other tricky situations as well in the past around authors really having a point of view and being miffed with you for some reasons. It's helpful to have senior folk that act at some level, I guess, as because you're in the thick of things and you're making you're doing these interactions. It's helpful to have someone that presents themselves as a neutral party and manages some of these interactions for you, or acts as a buffer effectively. So a common and the point I'd like to make is that when we started off, we wondered if this whole approach of making it pro bono and having everyone on the core team really being volunteers, would it actually work? It does work. Comes with challenges. Sometimes the ball drops on a bunch of things, and then you figure that it helps to have at least someone that's full time. But again, constraints around budget, of course, and I think we've now developed a rhythm at this point among the 5 or 6 of us that run this to ensure that everything goes really well. And I think there's a really high level of and the joke we make a lot of times is this this runs on love and fresh air. And I think it just having a team that understands that has seen us through I think at this point 8 editions, and we'll see how it goes this year. I can jump into questions, or I'll start to look at the Q&A.
Yeah, there are quite a few questions coming up. Srikrishna,
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
It's a little out of the norm from what we had originally discussed, but it sort of came from what you've said. Like I said, you're one of the few festivals that really relies on an advisory board, and you've used them very effectively to take certain decisions, which maybe a single founder would not have been able to navigate on on her own or his own, or their own. My question actually is to do with stakeholder management. If you can give me a sense of like this section 144, it was imposed and you decided to go ahead or not go ahead. How does your advisory board or you or the team deal with stakeholder management? Because there are, if it's a paid event, people are expecting, the money back. If it's a sponsor, they've given you a certain amount of money with the expectation of a certain number of eyeballs. So if you could give us a sense of how stakeholders are managed using the board, that would be really helpful.
Sure. And very quickly, the 2 points you bring up sort of didn't apply, thankfully for us. And in hindsight, you realize that because you are donor funded, and there's a level of understanding that folks have, that even if you were to call it off, you've spent some bit of it, but perhaps you could be returning the rest of the money back, because we otherwise don't really have any costs to run the festival on an ongoing basis, right? It's only for the time of the festival when we need this. But going back to your question, I think making sure that we're keeping our folks on our advisory board, and in general, I think advisors that we rely on for a variety of things. One, keeping them up to speed with what's going on with us, making sure that there's a strong level of communication that you're putting out, especially during crises. I think you have to over communicate, and that's the norm. So those sort of things have helped us. I think we don't necessarily do as much beyond the duration of the festival in terms of active communication, unless and until, because again, a lot of the communication for us is also really tied around the festival. But areas where we reach out end up being, hey, look, we're asking folks, especially the ones that we rely on for advice and that are part of the board, for input on curation as well, which translates into interesting authors who they might have met, or interesting speakers that they think we should definitely be looking at, or for a viewpoint on here's someone, there are pros and cons of perhaps bringing someone like this person on, and trying to build getting a viewpoint, which really then can help form our decision. And again, I think the clarity for us is that the decision making is always with the team, and I think that understanding has always been there, that we're the ones that would like to be we are the ones that are taking the decision, but seeking input and making sure that it's acted upon, and it's understood, acted upon, and feedback relayed to folks as well. So that, I think, has really formed and it's a combination, honestly, of being a combination of both formal and informal, the whole to your point on stakeholder management and how we do it.
Thanks for that, Srikrishna. I have actually made a question live for you to answer. I'm just going to ask that. Dana Roy asks, what's your structure and the resources that help you reach out to so many individual citizens as donors, sponsors, and maintain those relationships?
Sure. The structure, I mean, it is from a structure standpoint, we run this as a trust. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. Again, the resources, I guess, given that all of us are pro bono in this, each of us just end up using, whatever are the resources at our disposal to reach out. But I think what's worked has been that one, being able to leverage the networks that our advisors bring in order to be able to raise donor money. I think that's really how that's worked, and the way that reach has widened has ended up being, once you've seen a few people come in, then asking them for referrals, introductions, and really at some point just being shameless about putting the ask out, and till you've got no for an answer, assume that there is still a yes there, right? So ask multiple times, don't hesitate to ask. But and I'd say it's gotten better over time, because the festival has developed as a property over time as well, right? There's recognition now. Folks look forward to it. There is a brand that has been built. Again, we've leveraged some for advisors for that as well. So there is all of that. So there is, at some point, I think you're starting to see a desire and an aspiration for people to want to be associated with the festival, and hence saying, I'd like to contribute because I know that there's a positive rub-off for me as well, because I'm seen as someone that I'm seen as someone that is backing this.
The famous cultural social capital debate. Thank you so much, Srikrishna. I can see there are lots of questions for you, and I think they're looking forward to you to respond to them. I'd like to segue very quickly to Jonathan. Jonathan, we've seen 3 wonderful presentations so far. It would be great to hear from you if you see any strong themes emerging. Like one, obviously, theme I'm very clearly seeing is funding, I know we've spoken about addressing it for our next webinar, but I'd love to hear from you about what you've, any key thematics that you seem to have seen emerge over the last 3 sessions.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Rashmi. I'm not quite sure if you can see me. There we go. Oh, I seem to have dropped off the camera, but I'm just going to keep speaking nevertheless. Hopefully I'll pop back shortly. Okay, so I'm just going to keep speaking. Okay, there we are, I'm back. Okay, so what's absolutely apparent in terms of, I think, connections between festivals in the UK and across India is that resilience comes from the ability of festival managers and artists to reframe and reinvent, and in this moment also reorganize, sometimes in very real ways in terms of shifting timeframes of festivals and moving your plans around. And then how you then ensure that in that moment of what may appear to be existential as a crisis, you hold on to certain things that are dear to the festival's foundation, because they will see you through. And that's the sense of cause and mission. And that in terms of how you can manage that process through in terms of a crisis, and I think this is very live in terms of Tom's presentation, safety first in terms of your staff, artists, audiences and sponsors and partners. Cash is king, and get on top of your cash position so you know how to deal with the next day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter. Fundraising, and the fundraising model is really key, whether that's individual donors, in-kind support, fundraising from governments, and that mixture of the income model is key in terms of having a mixed model that will help buffer in times of a crisis. They don't necessarily resolve it, but they'll help support it. Mindful that the systems of fundraising and funding in the UK and India are very different. I really like the thing of abandon yesterday. So this is also a time to reflect, adapt, and in that time to reflect, you can think of how you can change what your operating model is for your festival. So rather than this being seen as a moment of high crisis and a conniption, use it for a time to reflect, rather than panic, and remain steadfast in your belief of why your festival is there in the first place. I think it was also really, really key in terms of the last two presentations around partnerships. Your partners and your trustees aren't there just when the good times are flying, but also in these moments when the ecosystem around you helps you see you through it, whether that's in pooling of resources or in using your trustees and their networks to help open out a wider set of who you can engage with from a fundraising perspective, of course, in this moment, but also in terms of that wider network that they may bring to you from the corporate sector. And I think it's also really clear that it's absolutely apparent from all of the speakers this week and last week, so much of the value of festivals comes from the individuals who run them. And whilst the festival itself has to be resilient, so do the individuals. So being able to balance two jobs to run a festival, whilst on the face of it seemed to be a bit of a constraint, it may also be a virtue in this moment. I think that is for me for now. I'll pass back to you now, Rashmi, and we'll look forward to the next set of speakers. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was really helpful. I'm just going to pick up a couple of other themes that are also popping up. I know a lot of you asking about digital formats, a lot of you asking about fundraising, and I can see that a lot of those questions are being answered. There are 31 open questions right now and about 27 answered questions. So I can see that the backlog is being cleared as soon as possible. But one request to all our attendees, this is a session on leadership and governance. So use this as an opportunity to ask your questions about leadership and governance as well, along with the questions that you might have related to funding and larger formats of digital versus physical in this. I know it's the current need is preoccupying our minds, but do use this to think about restructuring and reformatting the way you should be looking at your work as well. So that's one request from me to you. The other thing that I also wanted to highlight is the fact that we've so far seen 3 festivals, and the models of those festivals have also been quite interesting, or rather 2 festivals, one of which was a founder-led festival. It was a Section 8 company. We are going on next to another format, but this one that we just saw, the Bangalore Lit Fest, was a community-led festival in some sense, and it's a not-for-profit public charitable trust. We're now moving on to what to me is a very exciting structure to bring on board. I remember when we were talking about the entire idea of festival connections and festivals as a structure, it seemed very post-liberalized idea of what a festival is, but it's India. We've had festivals and celebrations for a very, very long time, as I mentioned. And one of those examples before festival became a buzzword was festivals did run in India, and they were run in the form of music conferences, music events. So we're very excited to have with us Harishankar Krishnaswami, who is the secretary of Narada Gana Sabha, who's one of the 11 key sabhas that are a part of the massive Madras music season, or Chennai music season as we know it now, with a plethora of concerts that happen in the city over 2 months. And it has been organized and governed since 1927. So I'm personally really excited to see the growth of this sort of format of running a celebration of music, and also something that's older than our republic. So I'm quite excited to see how this unfolds. Harishankar, looking forward to hearing you speak. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. This is, it's one of the oldest formats of festivals probably in India. And I'll just straight away dive into my presentation. I'll request Yadu to put up the presentation slides. And we'll go to the second slide. This is just an introduction. And yeah, the Madras music season, as it used to be known when it started, it's now Chennai. Earlier it used to be Madras. So that's why I kept the name as Madras music season. The origin of the music season itself, the history, if you have to trace it back to way back, it has to start from the Bhagavad Gita. And the reason for this is timing of the music season. This is also called as the December music season now. But it always happens in December, which coincides with the Tamil month of Margazhi. And the Tamil month of Margazhi has references in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 35. I'll just read that portion where the Lord describes himself as the best in everything, and one of that being the month of Margazhi. So the best month, according to the Bhagavad Gita itself, was the month of Margazhi. And on the side, you would also see the picture of Andal. She is the poet, Tamil poet Andal, who composed poetry. And she, along with her mates, used to sing this poetry and render this poetry around the temples in Srivilliputturu, which is in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, and the state of Tamil Nadu. So these are probably the earliest references to the celebration in December, in the month of Margazhi. So it all started from there. And then in the early 20th century, I'm saying about 1901 to that was a time when the singing around temples became popular. And that was a time when most of the Indian states were having rulers. And these rulers, the kings, used to support the art forms. So it's not just music, it's music, then dance and theater. All of these were supported by them. And they used to host festivals in their neighborhoods. And come 1927, the All India Congress session was taking place in Chennai. And that's when the seeds for this modern form of the music season, as we know it today, the seeds were sown then. The December music season originated from the 1927 All India Congress session, where on the sidelines they had a music conference. And this, because some of the prominent citizens of those days, they were all part of the Congress, and one of them is T.T. Krishnamachari, who was, who funded and who was like the founder, one of the founders of the Music Academy. And the Music Academy was started in August 1928, and then they had their first annual music conference in December 1929. Why December? Was because the entire place, people used to have, as I said, one is the connect with the mythological beliefs in the month of Margazhi, the Tamil month, which is usually between 15th of December till January 15th. So that's the time when there are people on holidays. Most of the Englishmen who used to be in India all had their Christmas vacations. So this was a time when most of the businessmen and a lot of people had holidays at the time, including lawyers. Lawyers still have a Christmas vacation. And many of these lawyers were involved in pioneering various institutions, or the Sabhas, as we know of them today. And up till the 80s, the music season in December was mainly hosted by three institutions. One is the Music Academy, of course, and then the Indian Fine Arts Society and Tamilisai Sangam. So all these three institutions, functioned out of premises in the north of Chennai, which used to be both the business place as well as people where the wealthy businessmen used to reside. So in the 60s, in the late 60s is when the Music Academy first bought their own premises, and they moved to the south central part of Chennai. And as the residential neighborhoods shifted to central and south Chennai, so did the Sabhas. So at this point, there were many Sabhas that were mushrooming, from between 1901 to say 1950s, there would have been new sabhas that were mushrooming. And sabhas are basically clubs. You know, if you have to have a colloquial form, these are clubs formed by residents of a neighborhood or people who had common interests or hobbies. They used to just get together and form these associations or societies, clubs, and so that they could have programs. And it's not just the December music season. These clubs used to host programs throughout the year. Can I have the next slide?
Hari, just 1 second. We will move to the next slide. Just give us a minute. It's
Sure.
hung a bit.
Okay. So I'll just go on. And, so from this thing now, from the history, I'll move on to the geography of where these sabhas were located. As I said, most of the residential neighborhoods started mushrooming in the south central part of the city. So that's when we had all these institutions migrating to the south central suburbs of the city, parts of the city. I shouldn't say suburbs. These are very much part of the city. And I have put out in my next slide, the map of a few of these institutions, and just pointed out where these institutions are located. So most of them, they either have their own auditorium or they hire premises. So these are the now you get the next slide, which shows the various auditoriums and where the things are located. And then that would lead us to the list of prominent institutions. That's the next one that's coming up. Yeah. So these are about 10, 11 institutions that have been conducting the music season in December concerts for, I would say, more than 20, 25 years at least. I think Hamsadwani, which is second in the list, has been hosting for about 25 years now. And that's the least. All the others are over institutions having conducting programs for over 25 years. And as I said, Music Academy has been doing it for 91 years now. Parthasarathi Swami Sabha is the oldest Sabha in Chennai. It's about 120 years old. And these sabhas are all basically societies, associations that are registered under the Societies Registration Act, and some of them are trusts also, non-profit organizations, trusts, which were started by fewer individuals. And basically they also have to undergo all the rigors like a company of having to have annual general meetings, and then the office bearers are elected. Most of the time, but you will find that it's a particular group of office bearers or people who have been working over a long period of time. To speak for myself, my organization, Narada Sabha, started in 1958. And my father used to be the secretary until he passed away in 2015. So he was there for a little more than 50 years. And, now there are people who are there from the past and some who have left us, but it still continues. And we do have, elections and all that stuff. Now, organizing the music season itself, it starts off with the auditorium. So as I said, there are sabhas which have their own auditorium, and there are institutions that do not have an auditorium of their own, which means they need to hire premises. As you saw, if you remember the map, these institutions are spread all over the city, and programs are happening. All that I had plotted out was only the 12 institutions, but I would say there are at least another 10 to 15 more institutions or organizations that are hosting music concerts. Some could be even like chamber music, which happen in backyards of residences or in lawns. And there are others who hire or put up semi-permanent structures like a pandal, that mushrooms up during this time. And they do their season there. And the timing of the season also, there are people who start sometime in early November also, and it goes on till end of January. There are not many that go beyond January. And as I said, hiring of the auditorium is the prime need for any institution that is not operating out of its own premises. The audience generally have been patronizing the sabhas that have their own auditorium because they know that they can where they can go and where the programs will happen, and also the other comforts and infrastructure are all well provided, and it's kind of predictable. Then the next job is to have the artists, and the fixing of artists, it usually starts, the scheduling of artists starts sometimes in the December itself, in this December for the next year. There are artists who have specific dates for specific organizations. So, for example, if I would take a popular artist, Yesudas, he would sing at Narada Sabha every year on December 19th. So, just as he finishes his performance on stage on December 19th of say 2019, he would tell us that we will see him again on December 19th, 2020. So, this is how the artists start getting fixed. The senior artists or the more popular ones have dates fixed almost a year in advance. And then the next set of the younger artists, that's where the crucial part of the organizer is, because there are almost about 900 concerts happening only between these 12 sabhas, because there are 5 concerts a day and 60 concerts, that means across all sabhas, and there will be about 900 concerts. So we need to factor in the prime time is taken by the popular artists, which is in the evenings from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. and the others come earlier. So these concerts, most of these, we get flooded with applications throughout the year. Most of us organizers, we do individually, each organization, each sabha does it separately. They scan through all the applications. Today, most of it is online, but we still have physical copies of resumes being circulated to us. And we do go through that. And then, of course, the word of mouth, like the seniors or the gurus of these people, the teachers, they tell us, there is this new kid who's there. So it's almost like talent scouting. So that also happens. So we try to bring in as many youngsters as possible. And depending on for how long they've been performing, they move up the ranks from, say, an 8 a.m. concert in the morning to make their way up to the 4 p.m. There are people who have made their way up like this, even the popular ones of today. This is how they have come through the ranks. So then after the artists, the next slide is going to be on, the ticket sales. So when the ticket sales start happening is sometime in August, September, and many a times the sale of season tickets, the passes for the entire season happens to members of these organizations first, and it happens even before the programs are fully scheduled. So usually the popular programs are the ticketed ones, and the younger artists have free programs where all are welcome and people can all come in. So the season ticket sales starts first to members of the organization. Most of us are filled up with requests from members itself, and most of the tickets are sold to members, and then it comes to the non-members. And here is where I would like to talk about the other 15 organizations which are not regulars. There are organizations which have recently mushroomed. Many of them have been categorized as fly-by-night operators. They may be here for a year, and then the next year you may not find them. But they are in this mainly for generating revenue out of it. So they try to get sponsorship out of it from corporates, and otherwise it's from sale of tickets. So for them, these sale of tickets happens online also. Most of the old sabhas are still not completely online in their ticketing and other platforms. And I think it's high time that we start moving towards that. Then once the tickets are done, the next crucial aspect of this December music season is the canteens. So we call it canteens. It's basically a food chain, a food stall that is put up especially for the music season. And the genesis of this is from the fact that people are listening to programs from morning till night. So they may not have time to go home and have food and come back. So what we have is, we have these marriage caterers who act as put up canteens in various sabhas. So we call them and we fix up with these caterers and ask them to put up stalls in our organizations. And why this is also significant is, in the month of Margazhi, weddings don't take place. So the marriage caterers are all free during that time. They are basically without work. So for them, this acts as a marketing tool. It acts as an advertisement for their wares. So they come and take up the stall spaces in all these sabhas, especially the prominent ones. And there is today virtually more crowd for the canteens than for the music itself in many cases. So, and there is also a competition between the caterers on who's got the special dishes and what's new, what's special in each organization and things like that. So it's kind of an overall festival that is happening. It's a festival not just for the ears, but also a feast for the foodies too. The challenges.
Just have 2 minutes more to cover the challenges, and then we'll dive straight into the questions. Sorry to interrupt.
I'll be done. So the challenges is the next slide. So the challenges is one, as I told you earlier, I touched upon picking the artists, especially the younger talent. The number of applicants are so many. So we try to bring some yardstick, like people having gradation with the All India Radio and stuff like that, so that we can have that as a minimum requirement to for somebody who aspires to apply. And then the other challenge is the physical infrastructure. Just as the auditorium goes, if there is this whole thing that's going to happen throughout the day in each venue, the support that we look forward to from the administration, the government, is on water, sanitation, and electricity. So these are crucial things where we need support of the government. People have been skeptical about having government support for funding, but insofar as these infrastructural things are concerned, we do need the support of the government. Then the transport and parking. Most of these places are located in a very short radius. So the transportation is usually taken care of by the public transportation, but parking could be an issue in most of these venues, because many of them don't have parking for huge crowds. And when there are audiences moving in and out of performances, you may need more parking. Ticket sales, as I said, online formats have not caught up yet. So that's something that's challenging for the time being. And then sponsorship. Sponsorship, each organization has its own. Because sponsors comes with strings attached. They don't, there are organizations like Narada Sabha doesn't work on the sponsorship. It is more funding from the members. So it's more crowd-funded that way. So we rely more on that. But sponsorship, and especially in these times, could be difficult this year. The natural calamities, I say natural calamities because in 2015, we had a flood situation and many programs got cancelled because artists were badly hit and they wanted to stay away. And we could expect a similar situation this year too. But in 2015, the floods, the Chennai floods happened in December, early part of December. So that really badly hit us. And then last, the challenge, but not the least, it's the controversies. So every year it's been one controversy of a kind. You know, sometimes it's happening to ban artists or calls for banning artists who have participated in a certain religious congregation or in a certain religious thing. And sometimes it's something like the Me Too. So that is also, that has come about. We need to be sensitive to all the requirements and need to listen to them and then take decisions. How we take decisions is through, you know, a collective process. At least about 10 or 11 of these sabhas have a common forum, like the Federation of City Sabhas, where we decide together. So this is about the presentation, and can go ahead with questions if you have any.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful and quite a rare insight, because when you look up on how the, you know, there's so much information about the music season, but not enough about how it's organized and how decisions are taken. So this is extremely special. Thank you so much again, Harishankar. There have been some very interesting questions that have emerged. I would urge you to answer them. I'm just going to pick up a couple of them and then lead into my moderator question. So two of them had to do with audiences. Shivani and Meera Warrior have both asked about audiences. I think Shivani is mainly speaking about that, you know, for all the upcoming artists who are not featured in prime time, do you face a problem of pulling in your audiences, especially given the number of events happening at the same time? While Meera has asked a question about, it's a festival over 100 years old. Can you share insights on how you stayed relevant to the changing generations, and how do we keep the legacy strong and going? So if you could just address both the questions together, that'll be great.
Yeah, so first on the audience for the younger performers during the day. It is a challenge, but mostly it's taken care of by the performers themselves. So they invite all their friends and well-wishers so that, you know, they can show, put up a good show and have a good audience for their programs. So really the young ones really manage with you know, invited audience. Insofar as staying relevant and how do we continue it, I think technology is the way to go about. I strongly believe in that. One, the artists are averse to having their programs live streamed and things like that due to various issues which they have. But we need to work with that. And just as I said, in ticketing, we need to have more technology in. We need to bring in technology for the audience aspect as well. So I think these can help us stay relevant and move with the times, so that we will also be able to understand the pulse of the audience and give programs that they like, if it is thrown open to a wider audience, not just to the audience within the auditorium.
The conversation around the relevance over changing generations, but I'll also add the second question, which was my original question to you, Harishankar, was about how are decisions taken as a community, as a group, especially when you may not agree with each other on what decision needs to be taken. So actually there's a anonymous attendee who's asked this question. I'm going to read that out. When it comes to ethics and morals, issues such as climate change, Me Too, minority persecution, obviously a strong leadership is critical to making the appropriate decisions. What advice can you give to leaders or emerging leaders whose ideology on certain issues might differ from that of their boss or founder?
See, it's very crucial. As I said, we need to be sensitive towards the needs of the society at large, because it's the society that makes us function. And the only thing that I can say, also wearing the hat of a lawyer, that at all times try to do what is mandated by law. Follow the law to the T, and there are no shortcuts to this. So if there is an issue, an environmental issue, or if there is an issue like the Me Too, for instance, the thing is to put in place a structure wherein people address all their issues. They vent out their grievances and have a thing that will answer their queries, at least, or at least attempt to take up these issues and debate it in a larger forum. What we do here is, as I said, about 12 of us have an institution called as the Federation of City Sabhas, which started in the early 70s. And this helps us to collectively look at these various issues. And there we insist that, what the law states, what the law gives us, and try to follow that to the T. So if we have complaints, we try to address those complaints jointly. And at the end of the day, it's a decision that needs to be made collectively. So like any other decision, it's not just the majority that wins, but it has to be a decision that is also legal. So that kind of addresses the situation.
Thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. And actually, the way you've spoken about it and the way you address some of the questions makes us think about how and why do we need to have a very diverse advisory board for any cultural organization, because the perspective and the objectivity with which a lawyer would come in vis-a-vis a scientist, vis-a-vis an artist, would all add value to the kind of decisions we need to be taking for the running of this organization. So thank you so much for that, Harishankar.
Thank you.
And,
thanks for having me.
Thanks. And from Chennai, let's parachute again to Chennai, over to Varun. He is back. Varun, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. If we can have your screen live, fantastic.
Hello. I think Yadu should share my presentation because I think screen sharing gave us an issue. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
No worries. So it just sort of helped us line up both sessions together. Hari, please do respond to. There are lots of questions for you. I think currently we've crossed 75 questions with about 30 questions which are still open. But over to you, Varun. Looking forward to your presentation.
Great. I've also I think someone will put my link in my bio in the chat. I wanted to show a video, but in the interest of sort of technological failure, I'd say that please click through and watch that video. So like Rashmi said, I'm the director and the co-founder of the Chennai Photo Biennale. Also the managing trustee of the CPB Foundation. So within this one organization, I wear two sort of hats. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So a little bit first about the organization, the foundation, and then I'll go into specifically addressing our governance structure. So our three primary pillars, I guess, could be summarized into one: placemaking for the city of Chennai. I think our goal originally, we articulated that we want to put Chennai on the map of the world of contemporary arts. I think it's perfect that I've come after Hari because, the city of Chennai has a very rich tradition of music, and it's known for that. And everybody in the world knows Madras for its music season. But I think when it comes to contemporary art, particularly, especially with photography, there's less been happening traditionally, and one's trying to activate that. Also, the city has a heritage that's quite incredible, but relatively unknown or sort of being forgotten quite rapidly. and we look to celebrate that through our interventions as part of the Biennale. Of course, one of our deep roots and where we started and where my personal interest came in was from early 2010. I started working in public art and public art interventions. So I started train stations, then parks, then beaches. And really, this interest continues through whatever we do. So whether it's part of the main Biennale or throughout the year, we try to intervene in public space as much as possible. The objective for that is, of course, new audience creation or generation. I think it's an important thing to create an audience for art from the grassroots up, and that's what we attempt to do through our public art interventions. There's also, of course, visual arts education, and that's something we turned on in 2018, and we started it with the idea to bring photography education to schools and college students in different levels, and I'll touch on that. Next slide, please. So just a snapshot of 2019, which was our most recent edition, which was our second edition that concluded. It was curated by, of course, the wonderful Pushpamala, who many of you may know, which is an incredible performance artist photographer. Our second edition had a total of 51,000 viewers who walked in through our many venues. We had a total of 15 exhibition venues, of which 6 were considered primary venues, 4 student exhibitions, and then several collateral shows in different private art galleries. We showed the works of 50 international artists from 13 countries in very interesting interventions. So please do click through the video link because you'll get to see the kind of works we showed and how. And of course, we were spread over 30 days and we programmed about 100 different events and talks during this period. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we did a lot of different projects about on the second edition. Sorry, go back up. So in the second edition, 2 of the major sort of things I want to highlight is one, of course, one of our public art interventions in the second edition were photographic projections on the beach. So we had 2 weekends, 16, 17 March, 23rd, 24th, where we set up these large screens on the beach in Besanagar in Chennai, and you know, thousands and thousands of people wander in and out of this space. We showed the works of interactions. We also curated a few of these within ourselves, and of course our student exhibitions from our photo camps, which I'll talk about in a second. So the beach is an interesting place in Chennai with more than 800,000 people coming on the average weekend between Saturday and Sunday. And it's a great way for us to create new audience and help people discover the Biennale. Also to, to find people who necessarily won't come and see the Biennale, but to expose them to new photography art. Next slide, please. So our education program, which has become one of our core projects throughout the year now, and one of the pillars on which we really strongly want to work going forward, we started teaching photography through mobile phones to government school children all over Chennai and in the suburbs as well. So far, we've taught about 900 students through this program. These are very short format programs of 2-day workshops, and had actually what we ended up doing was finding talent through these programs, identifying them, and then taking 25, 30 students to residential photography camps and really helping them create a body of work. So what you see in the photograph is actually an exhibition as part of the last edition of the Biennale of the students' work that was at the Egmore Museum. So we really wanted to create talent, identify talent, and also create an output that would be seen by a larger audience. And this, of course, ran in parallel to what we call our Fun Bus program, which was bringing students of schools to visit the Biennale, because part of education is also the idea of a field trip and being exposed to different art and this idea of an exhibition. Next slide, please. We also had a skill development program. And the reason I'm highlighting these programs is because it's more relevant to the foundation as much as the Biennale. So we did a skill development program because, I mean, many photographers who are listening and others will agree that often when you have young people coming to you and saying, I want to be assistants, they're not necessarily exposed to professional photography and how to work with equipment or how do you speak or behave around clients. And that's when we said, well, let's construct a program bringing professional photographers, teaching their specializations where they make their livings, and exposing government college students within Chennai and the region to this kind of pedagogy there. And so it was an interesting string of 12 workshops that we constructed, which included food, fashion, product photography, even Photoshop. And all of these sort of students benefited from the experience of these professional photographers, which is quite often very different from a professor in an academic situation. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight, so we commissioned an impact study report, and there are two sort of pieces I wanted to highlight from the data we got back. We had 2,500 survey that were filled up, and this is the, two important points I want to stress on is one, 75% of the audience felt more positively about the city of Chennai as a result of visiting the Chennai Photo Biennale. And I think that's an important, because we, as our objective, as our vision, we put the idea of place making for Chennai and identity creation. And to get data like this in 2019, it arms us that we're on the right path and we can move forward, and we need to build on this, because I think the youth of the city definitely need to find more things to identify with, and the Biennale could become one of those things. Also, 78% became aware of a new art or culture as a result of this experience. And I think fundamentally we want to broaden the access to arts across the board, and that's that's showing us that we're also working in that direction, and we want to grow there. Next slide. So coming back a bit to the little bit of the governance and how this all happened. So in 2015, I think Rashmi mentioned the foundation was born. Well, actually, it was just a group of friends. It was me and a few of my photography friends, Shuchi, Gayatri, who are now on the trust, my wife Priyanjali, and several other people came together. Justine and several of us just said, you know what, let's do a festival. And at that moment, the Goethe Institute, Chennai, had a new director, Helmut Schippert, who now has become a great friend. And Helmut, became one of the early backers who saw potential in this idea and this group of people and said, you know what, let's do this. And so Helmut and me sort of became co-founders, and we decided to do a fairly large and ambitious program with very little amount of money. And we spanned some 19 venues, had 100,000 people walk through these venues and all kinds of stuff. And it was quite exciting as a result. But in 2016, when we did the first edition, it was fabulous, well received. But then after that, what happened was that everybody had their own lives to go back to, and sort of this energy dissipated. And it was only in later 2017 that we all reflected, some of the team reflected and said, well, to make this more real and sustainable, we need to come together and do this and form an organization can then really become a sustainable future and the legacy for this festival. And that's when we created a non-profit trust called the CPB Foundation, which is registered as a public trust. And that entity helped us formalize the identity for the Chennai Photo Biennale. So now the CPB Foundation is the organizer, and the Goethe Institute becomes the organizing partner for the last 2 editions and the one that's coming up. And so then, of course, we got our certifications in 2018, which are quite important to fundraising, which I see a lot of questions about, and a milestone for a non-profit, I think, to achieve those. But then also we decided, well, this trust, this 5-member trust isn't enough, and we need to create an advisory board. And well, I mean, it was interesting to hear Vikram earlier say there's no formal identity for this board, because for us, it was easier to create a formal identity and then start inviting people there. So we've created a nice mix of people from advertising, from public relations, from business, from art, from within photography, from within the country and externally. So I think we are, of course, in the process of growing that, because I think an advisory board is a group of people that you can pick up the phone and call when you're in the need of advice on any one thing or help, or just sometimes a general conversation about thoughts. It's quite useful and actually very amazing to have that for us, and also access sometimes when you need. And in 2018, we also launched the education program, which came about with an early patron who decided to support us. And that was quite useful because it helped us suddenly go from an idea of wanting to teach photography to children to suddenly ramping up and saying, you know what, we're going to target 600 children this year and go after that with some funding to back that. And then, of course, in 2019, we conducted a larger second edition, which there's a video link for that. Please go and have a look. So come down to the next slide. So this is a bit about the structure. We have a board of trustees, like I said, and an advisory board. We also have a functioning working executive committee, which is myself, Shuchi, and Gayatri. And the three of us sort of make all the snap decisions that are required for the Biennale. So whereas the board of trustees would debate about who should be the next curator, what should be the budgets, or larger decisions on how to address the COVID situation, the executive committee more about, well, tomorrow we need to have this meeting and who can do this, or closer to the Biennale, this venue has this issue, what can we do about it? And of course, the Goethe Institute's team is constantly involved with us on many of our decisions, including, of course, Helmut Schippert, who's part of the board of trustees of the foundation itself. And then we have a threefold team. We have a permanent team that works throughout the year on our education and our ongoing programming. We have a curatorial team this year of 4 people. I'll show you quick pictures of them in a minute. And then we have a festival team that we ramp up 4 or 5 months before the Biennale that comes in to do the production and handle all of those sort of growing needs and demands of the festival itself. Next slide. So these are just some names. You can see this all on our website, but it's a mix of people. Next slide. So just to quickly end, I like to always plug the next edition. Our new dates are now set from 9th December to 6th February. We're open for 2 months. And of course, what's interesting for me to come after Hari sir is that we've aligned ourselves to the music season to really round out what the experience of coming to Chennai can be for someone from outside, anywhere, India or the world. Rashmi, just give me 30 seconds. We've doubled out the duration so that we realized last year that audiences were discovering us after 30 days. So doubling the duration allows people to hear about us in Delhi after 1 month and still show up. And also because Cochin Biennale is open in this time as well as Serendipity, you can see there's this ability to sort of move around the art scene of South Asia during this time, which is quite exciting for us. And just to my last slide. So we have a 4-member curatorial team, which is one of the other exciting things this year for us. Orko and Bhuma from India and Boaz and Kirsten from Germany. They have a variety of experiences as curators, and I think it's going to be quite an exciting, I won't say any much more about what's going to be in the Biennale, but given what's happening in the world, we're really sort of trying to keep our focus and eyes on the prize on the Biennale and working forward to that. So that's it for my presentation. If you can pick up the screen. And,
Thank you. Thanks so much, Varun. I think that was fantastic. Also, it's amazing to see the way very evidently you're using data to inform your decisions. And I know there's one question that is specifically to do with impact analysis, and I'll come to that in a second. But my first question, Varun, to you is, like I said, even when we were talking earlier, I felt like yours is one of the arts organizations that's very clearly focused on having a clear structure and using that structure to a specific, advantage. So my question to you, therefore, is that, and I know that you're looking at getting more advisors and board members on board. What's your strategy to recruit board members and advisors? What are you looking for in terms of strengths and also non-negotiables when you're looking for someone to be on your advisory board?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. I think, I think they're twofold here. So first, there's the trustees and then there's the advisory boards, and both have different levels of involvement. I think the primary difference for me is in physical time, commitment, energy. As a trustee, for me, it's a given, because I know there are larger foundations out there that some trustees are silent trustees who don't do much and others participate more actively. We're a small organization at the early parts of our journey, and we really can't afford to have people on the organization or in the trust that are not actively involved. And I think that's where we've been lucky to bring in people from different areas who are committed to our cause and are fighting and picking up the phone every few days to make calls, push conversations that are even sometimes uncomfortable for them. So I think that, for us, when I'm recruiting someone as a trustee now, and that's really a real question, because for us, governance is something we've now started to look at. It's been 3 years as an organization, and a reflection is that there's a big overlap between our trust and our executive, and should that be? That's always a reflection, and you look at other foundations, and more often than not, there is a group of people who run it and do the work, but then there is the board, which is independent, who more talks about the future, etc. And we still haven't done that, primarily because, well, we're the only ones sort of driving this hard. And at this moment, we'd be happy to have other people and for us to do less of 2 things. But for this moment, I think where we are, we feel that it's important for us to keep driving that. But yeah, for us, when we're recruiting trustees, right now, kind of people we're recruiting is more from business. Because I think while we are together to represent the photography community, the arts, we have journalism, we have also the institutional approach. Where we lack is business, and particularly business houses from Chennai, because I think unless the city adopts us, we can't stand forever, and this is, sustainability is going to be a question. So that's where we are recruiting now for trustees. For advisors, it's more global. So actually recently we have brought in Florian Ebner, who's the curator of photography at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, because we really feel that we want to be more internationally perceived now. And having someone like Florian involved allows us to now communicate with some parts of the West, and we are looking to expand that. So we have invited more people, but also within the country, we're trying to bring in more people from education. And as our interests grow and our learning and understanding of how we want to intervene with photography grows, we do bring in more people. And from within the city as well, we need to bring in some more. We unfortunately, with sad demise of S. Mutaya, one of our the first advisor of our advisory board, we are looking to bring in some more people from the city who have a more historical perspective on the city itself. So yeah, each thing is different. And from an advisor, honestly, it's the ability to pick up the phone. I call my advisors regularly on things I need to pick their brain on, and sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours, but to be able to have an open channel.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Varun. I'm being mindful of the time, and I'll have to let go of the second question, but I have marked it to be answered live, so please feel free to answer it. I also want to mention at this point that there are a lot of questions that have already been answered, and panelists, if some other panelist has answered it, you can go ahead and answer those questions again. So it's not necessarily restricted to one panelist. So feel free to look at both the answered questions as well as the open questions while responding. Varun, that one question specifically for you has to do with the impact study. So please respond to that. I think it'll be really valuable, and I'll try and weave that back in towards the end of the session. But we'll have to move on to our next speaker. Thanks so much, Varun, again. A big thank you. So from Chennai, we are moving back to West Bengal now, and we'd like to bring in Sanjoy Ganguly. So this is again a slightly different model. Here we are looking at a collective. The next two models that we'll be looking at will be the collective-led festivals. The first one is Sanjoy Ganguly. He's the artistic director of the Jana Sanskriti Center for Theatre of the Oppressed. What's fascinating about this organization is that it's an independent organization. It's committed to the use of theatre to conscientize and empower the communities it serves. So as a part of their work, they also do a biennial festival, a festival every 2 years, a theatre festival called Muktadhara, which has been on since 2004. So it's also already had 8 editions. So the question that came to us when we were talking to Sanjoy was, Jana Sanskriti's audience and stakeholders are not just festival audiences, but also an imagined audience, a future audience for which they create. And that's a very different way of looking at audience or stakeholders. And in that realm, we're really looking forward to hear from Sanjoy on both the foundational basis of Jana Sanskriti, because clearly there's a very core, strong, deep-rooted vision here. But also, how do you look at running the Muktadhara, the festival itself, both from a governance and management perspective, given that this is your foundational journey? So over to you, Sanjoy. We've got 10 minutes for you. Thank you so much.
So I'm thanks to you, Deepthi, Rashmi, and British Council, and namaskar to all who are listening to me. See, this is practically I need to articulate why did I come to this world of art, and then festival is a part of it. So it's basically I have experienced a culture of monologue which oppressed me. I was in a situation where I was only asked to listen, only asked to watch, and carry out orders that comes from the top. So as a listener and a person who can only carry out orders, I was feeling oppressed, and it was a culture of monologue to me. And then I went to people interested in having dialogues. There also I noticed that it appears as if we are in a dialogue, but they are all multiple monologues, because before I say something, the other person I'm talking to is calculating what he or she would say soon after I finish my position. So we really don't listen to each other. We only try to win over each other. We don't want to understand the truth. We don't want to create the path. So most of the time, in the kind of association inside political party, I experienced this multiple monologues and noticed the lack of listening to others, true listenings. So therefore, I was looking for some alternative, and that's how actually the festival came, because the art world where spectators sincerely go to the auditorium or to the theatrical space or artistic space to listen, to see, to watch sincerely. At least there is a culture of sincerely examining and listening to the performers. But here also, I noticed that performance, showcasing art, stardom, these things also disturb the relationship between performers and the spectators. The spectators experienced a culture of monologue as if they have come to see, they have come to watch, they have come to take lessons from the artists. So that also something did not convince me. And when I went to the village, there actually the festival, the meaning of the festival appeared to me in true sense, where festival means coming together, having dialogue, creating connections, surrounding various occasions, people come together and they interact sincerely. This is how I actually perceived the meaning of the festival. So this culture of stardom, this culture of showcasing talent is also the purpose of the festival. That is one of the main purpose. But ultimately, to me, the objective is to really experience oneness, experience feeling of collectiveness, and creating an intellectual space where people will be speaking to each other and discover the intellectual faculties and evolve as intellectuals. So that's how actually we thought of organizing festivals. But before that, I must say that this festival is actually creating a global community of a particular theater school called Theater of the Oppressed, which evolved in South America, in Brazil in 1970s. We are the first exponent of Theater of the Oppressed in India. So basically, it is actually creating a global community of Theater of the Oppressed, but there are many other applied theater groups, social, political theater groups all across the globe are connected to it, and they keep coming to the festival. And a lot of universities based in Europe, United States, South America, Central Asia, a lot of universities are now interested in experiencing our work and the festival. So this is basically creating a globalization of art. So when I first went to the village, I noticed the intellectual faculty that exists within each human beings, each individual. So I realized that every individual is essentially intellectual. So this was so far a theorization when I was in the city, but when I went to the village and experienced the wisdom and the intellectual ability to think, then I realized that it was not mere theorization. I realized that people are intellectual, so they should be given an intellectual space. So my theater again was failing to recognize this intellectual faculty because it was more of a propaganda art. It was good theater, but it was propaganda. So then I was actually looking for a theater form which can really recognize the intellectual faculty of the people, which can break the monologue between actors and spectators. So I came across Augusto Boal, my teacher, and learned theater from him, worked with him for 19 years at a stretch, and then started a different kind of theater. So my theater created an audience. So my audience is capable of thinking. Even sometimes when the groups from outside India, when they come to perform in our villages, we experience intellectual debate, we experience perceptual challenge, things like that. So when we decided not to see theater as a problem-solving solution, let theater be an intellectual space, let us script intellectual power through theater. So scripting intellectual power was our mission, and we realized that experience that this scripting intellectual power on stage is changing the reality of stage. So we started changing. So a lot of people were interested to social scientists, economists, theater people. They started doing PhDs, MPhils. A lot of universities got connected with us. So people started examining how it was impacting, how it was changing the established social norms even. So this actually made Jana Sanskriti a point of reference in the world. So I started traveling all across the globe, in all continents. I was working with theater companies, groups, and many of them had the desire to see our work, how we are applying it in the field. So from their desire, addressing their desire to come and see our work, Augusto Boal and his son actually offered me this suggestion that let's have a festival. So we didn't have any Facebook or any social media connections. Even we had a very small computer at that time, but it was just the news reached through the people I worked with. So the first festival started in 2004, and then this is the 9th edition of the festival. So what happens here, people come and see our collective life because we live, all our whole-timers, full-time artists, we live together in the same place at our center. We eat together. We have land from where we get rice, pulses, spices, onions, potatoes throughout the year that we consume. So this is a collective where we all live together. So they come to experience this collective living. And then throughout the year, we have 30 satellite teams. They also regularly perform in front of their own audience. So they come to experience this collective life, and they also live together in the same campus. They eat together. We have a lot of time to speak. People speak politics, philosophy, history. They present their work. And also in the afternoon, we go to the village. So festival travels from village to village. First, it starts with workshops on theater of the oppressed, on method acting, on mime acting, on playback theater. So it actually starts with the workshops. And sometimes groups from outside India, they come to perform as a group. And workshop participants, they also make plays based on their problems. They script plays instead of playing the script. So we script plays instead of playing the script in the workshop, which they perform in front of our villagers. So those performance goes to the village after the workshop. So first 1 week is workshop, presentations, and then festival starts traveling from village to village. So you go to the village. So they live in the village, they interact with our actors from satellite teams, they interact with our all-women teams where only women act, and the women also play the role of the main character. They also meet our spectators, because there are villages where Jana Sanskriti has been performing for 30 years. So you can see 3 generations watching our theater. So the spectator community is also very interesting, and we have got committees of spectators in each villages. So they also get a chance to meet those spectators, and they get to know how they have changed their lives. So basically, because I said that we script intellectual power, that is our objective. So this intellectual power breaks passivity. So the spectators, they come to our theater and they become spectator, as Boal said, because they don't just, we just show them the problems. Then we ask people, how do you like to address these problems? So if someone is beating his wife, a husband is beating his wife, so they actually intervene into the play and try to understand how patriarchy is acting as an ideology within men, and how patriarchy is internalized even within the women for their upbringings. So all that things they discover. So this intellectual evolution breaks the passivity and they become spect-activists. So rather, I would say they meet our spect-activists, because they come as spectator, they become spect-actor, and scripting intellectual power, passivity breaks and they become spect-activists. So they actually meet those people, and the main thing, one of the very important thing of this festival is that there are 70 countries, more than 70 countries where theater of the oppressed is, you find the practitioner of theater of the oppressed, and for all of them to come to this festival is a challenge. They keep saving the same money throughout the year to come to this festival, because we don't go for any sponsor, we don't go for any institutional grant. So we actually, the participants, groups who come to perform, they come on their own, and also they pay 500 euros participation fees. So with that participation fees, actually we organize the festival. So we don't spend any money. So all the participants are the sponsor of this festival. So they come here. So in this festival, also they come across traditional art. They come across our forum performances. Sometimes it becomes very interesting because the festival is, because it creates connection. For example, in Barcelona, there are 3 groups operating, but they don't know each other. In Muktadara festival, they get to know each other and they create connection, and the collaboration starts. That is how we have started collaboration in many countries like Greece, like, for example, Germany, France, Spain, United States. There are many groups. They got to know each other from here, and now they're collaborating with each other. So,
hi, sorry, Sanjoy, just to let you know, we've got about 1 minute to go for your time.
Okay, so this is where they actually, I'm giving you an example. There was a play last year, Muktadara, where a woman was feeling that she was compromising with her freedom because she had to look after her father, old father at home. So that was the subject of the play. So our people, to them, it was not human. For them, the interpretation of freedom has some problems. From their perspective, this concept of liberation is not really a true liberation. So it was a perceptional challenge. We have all video recordings. So our audience, I'm very proud of the fact that our audience can engage themselves in such perceptional challenge. Simultaneous translation happens. So they basically, we are looking at the festival as an intellectual space where we become theater, because we see a lot of things, we interact with a lot of peoples, and we look at ourselves as a spectator of our own actor, how I think in my real life. So theater is basically the combination of actor and spectator. So we become theater, and they also get inspired to make theater after interacting with living in a collective for 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. They actually get connected, and that is what is the principal objective of our festival, not just showcasing the art, but also to see festival as an art of creating connection. That's it. We also have small festivals in the village besides Muktadhara. We call Masant Parab. Every end of Bengali month, the villagers come together. Some people sing, some people dance, some people make plays. So it's every month end the festival happens. And once a year in each Anchal Panchayat, there is a festival. And for that festival, we don't actually also get any sponsor, because satellite teams we have, they perform around 12 to 19 villages throughout the year. So they have their regular audience. After harvesting, they go to the villagers from door to door, they collect paddies and they sell that paddies, and the amount, the money they generate by selling those collected paddies, they make their own festivals. So we have village level festivals and we have this international festival. So that I'm sorry, I have many things to say, but
no, that's okay. I think between with you and Harikrishna, the amount of work that you've been doing over the several number of years, it's really tricky to fit everything in 10 minutes. And apologies for asking you to look at the time, but we are in the digital format, so we're trying to sort of see how best.
Yeah, I get very nervous within this time because I always think, oh, time is running out, time is running out.
No, but that was really fantastic. And seriously, Sanjoy, thank you so much. First of all, congratulations on your lovely work to be in 30 villages doing this kind of work over so many.
Not 30 villages, we work more than 150 villages. We have
30 years.
30 satellite teams.
30 satellite teams.
Teams located in various villages.
Okay.
So Jana Sanskriti is a composition of 30 teams, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually, just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that you had shared. One was very clearly, you spoke about how people from different parts of the world got interested in your work. So clearly in some sense, the festival becomes a point where... A meeting point for, and I've picked up some of these words, clearly there's cultural exchange. Yeah. There is intellectual stimulation, as you say.
Yes.
And new possibilities.
Yeah.
And I feel that's really exciting. So I'm just wondering if you could, just one question for you is, how is it that you decide on what possibilities to engage with and what not? It would be interesting to hear from you as a team, the people who take key decisions within your organization. If there's an example of someone coming in and say, I'm interested in studying you or working with you or collaborating with you, how do you take decisions on that basis, considering your mandate is so clear? It is intellectual stimulation. You want to work within these 150 villages and 30 satellite teams.
Yeah. Actually, this, we live together throughout the year. All the full-time artists, we live together. So some of us are expert in, maintaining the center as caretakers. We clean toilets, we pick up the participants, we maintain the room cleaning, we look at our kitchen, we cook at our kitchens, we cook because we have a team that can actually cook the food and also can cater. So we serve the food and we deliver workshop, we perform. So we have a team, and the team lives together for last 30 years. So we have clear understanding who can do what. And so therefore, the first 1 week in our center near Calcutta, the workshops and everything, like some of us, for example, people come to take my workshop. So there are many other workshop leaders, they also conduct workshops. So we know who all are going to take the workshops, who all are going for the marketing, who all are looking after the toilets and the rooms, who all are going to cook food and serve them. So this is very clear. The responsibilities are very clear. And when it goes to the village, then we travel from village to village. So first of all, we develop our base in one particular center of our village, where the women, men, they cook food. The whole villages get involved in looking after their guests, because these foreigners, those who are coming from outside the country, sometimes 32 countries, 40 countries, people come. Sometimes 100 people. Now we have restricted within 50, but sometimes there used to be 150 from 40 countries. So our villagers, they used to look after the guests. They would cook, they would serve, they would see that the tents are okay, cleaned, and local transport like the rickshaw van, motor vans. So how can they be transported to villages? All of it actually are the responsibility of the villagers. In particular village, when suppose we are going to a village where there will be the festival, there actually the local governments, local intellectuals like headmaster, teachers, lawyers, quack doctors. So it's completely community led. They actually take care of the light, stage, food, everything, sound system, everything they take care of it.
So in
So
that
it is
sense,
their response, generator. So everything they organize. So there is we form our spectativist committees are there in each villages where we have these festivals. So they actually contact with local intellectuals and local people who actually who have been watching our plays for years. So they come together, and sometimes they also create events like tug of war of the women. So they also create events.
You know, it's
So
really
it's
amazing.
basically a collective. It's basically a collective action. Our festival is a collective action with us and our community.
And also fantastic to see it's such a decentralized management, which is...
It's very decentralized. Like, for example, my responsibility is to answer the philosophical questions of the participants and to conduct workshop, to give them new improvisation of techniques. But I don't really think of other things like where from the apples will come, who will bring the bananas.
Nice. Of course, yeah.
Plumbing, is there any problem in the plumbing? Who has gone to call the plumber? All that are divided among the members. Yeah. So they take care of it, and we don't engage any event management group. That's why 500 euros subscription is quite a big thing for us. Yeah. We don't engage any event management group. We do on our own, and our participants, they feel really happy. They actually sense this collective, democratized collective lives where people have good understanding, they listen to each other, and they live together. And because it's a 2 weeks festival, 2-3 days before people come and they leave after 2-3 days. Yeah. So it becomes 3 weeks actually. 3 weeks living together. Yeah. People from 30-40 countries together living in the same place.
It's quite something.
It gives a sense of collective. And that is what we want actually.
For that, Sanjoy. I think that'll be a great segue into our next festival, which is also community driven. But Sanjoy, this has been exceptional, and thank you so much for your work. It's the work that you do that makes us think about how we need to keep looking at the work that we do in the arts as well. So that was quite an inspirational session. I can see that there are a couple of questions for you. Our team is going to call you and see how to get you to answer some of those. It's been really, really good. Thank you once again. With that, I would like to invite Lubna Shaheen, who is the Dynamic Program Director of the Ziro Festival of Music. Ziro is an outdoor music festival which is held in the Ziro Valley in the Northeast India and Arunachal Pradesh, and it's been held since 2012. The festival is spread over 4 days, and is hosted by the members of the Aptani people in Ziro. Aside from the complexities of running a festival in a location with no direct flights, a struggle to run a sustainable festival when sustainability wasn't as big a buzzword as it is today, and the requirements for entry and inner-line permits, which is what we have in Arunachal Pradesh. We are very, very keen to understand how such a community-driven festival is led and governed, right? And for me, that's, I mean, again, stemming so beautifully from Sanjoy's, way of talking about how the decision-making, the running is completely decentralized. And I think even Ziro is a fascinating model. It's quite a sort of flag post for a lot of us when we look at festival models in the country, particularly music festivals, which is a youth-driven idea of experience, consumerism around the arts, right? So I think that's really fascinating. And I'm also very keen to see your role yourself, Lubna. You're one of the youngest participants that we've had today. You have been an ATSA fellow. You have also been, with the Australia Arts Leadership Program. So I'm very keen to sort of hear from you about how your journey has been as someone who's been in the leadership team, but also curatorially how your work has evolved. So over to you, Lubna. Thank you. So you can see the video on the screen, everyone.
Do you think you could? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Can we have the third slide? Yeah. So Ziro is, we pride ourselves on being an eco-friendly festival. And from the beginning, it celebrated the Apatani culture, who are the people who live in Ziro. And so we call ourselves the eco-friendly festival that celebrates diversity in music and culture. And if you noticed in the video, our stage and actually the entire infrastructure in the festival is made of bamboo, which is locally sourced either from Ziro, and a certain variety that is required for bigger constructions is brought from the nearest town where it's locally, sourced from the region itself. And can we go to the next slide? So the festival has, in the beginning, we started the festival with only 60 artists, but one clear idea that the festival had from the very beginning was to have create a platform for Northeast artists to come together with artists from around the world and have a platform to showcase their work. And the first edition had hardly 300 attendees. This is including local people that came to the festival, and maybe 150 people that came from outside. But in the 8 years that we have been running the festival, now our last edition had over 200 artists from, which included 5 international bands, and an equal number from Northeast India and from the rest of India. And we had about 6,000 attendees. Can we go to the next slide? Actually, just a thing in our journey was as we grew, I mean, there was a there was a limitation when we began the festival. Getting to Ziro was not exactly the easiest way to get there. It still isn't easy, but now there's a train that goes there and it's only a 4-hour drive to get there. But in the beginning, some bands were stuck in landslides for over 24 hours, and it was a journey that we started. We turned that around to call it the journey of your life, and the journey itself has become a huge part of the festival now. We created a treasure hunt. We got a festival train now, and basically the audience that's coming to the festival know that the journey of, Ziro Festival is an experience that begins with the journey itself, and that I think was very essential to our growth and the USP of the festival. It's not just a city festival where you can like go for an hour and come back. It's an investment that the audience is making to come to the festival. And moving on to how we run the festival, we'll stay there. Sorry, I was so who we are, we are a bunch of people who really just wanted to create something in Ziro. It was started by the conversation of the festival was an idea between two people that happened in 2011, but now, ever since the first edition of the festival that happened a year later, it's been a collective of people, and it's approximately 10 people that come together every year. So we are very collective led, but our team is of 10 people is majority local people from the community, and who so some of us, of course, work throughout the year, but it's not a full-time job for anyone. It's secondary to our work, and it's something that happens every year only because for the love of it. And some of us work throughout the year. Some things like programming and finance obviously have to be worked throughout. We work throughout the year to just keep working on it. But when it comes to production or production design, marketing, that happens pretty much maybe 3 or 4 months before the festival. So we have always been a DIY festival simply because of the fact that we just come together for the love of it. So like I actually already said that, but so our team, what's great about the festival is that we have in the very first year, we hired people from outside to come and do the production of the team. But over the years now, the production team of the festival is 90% locals who have trained over the years. And so it's been very informal skills building and training, but it's come to a place where they professionally run the festival. And we have about 200 young local youth volunteers that come in to also help us produce the festival. So can we go to the next slide, Yadu? I just wanted to run us down through some of the milestones that we have had. I actually already went through some of this, but I think some of our major milestones when the government of Arunachal came on board and included it in the state calendar of events. That was a huge support from like the government, which allowed us to and this was in the second year of the festival. So this allowed us to really plan forward because being assured of a percentage of money to run the festival meant that we don't have to start from scratch every year. It was also the year that the US consulate came on board and we saw our first international band that came to the festival. The government of India joined in a few years later, and Doordarshan became the official media partner. They've live, what do you call it? They have shown the festival on their on all the channels, even live, and that's how the growth has continued with the of the festival. But in 2018 is when we started reflecting on what 5 years of the festival has, 6 years of the festival had, 4 or 5 years of the festival had already achieved for Ziro, and that was there was a huge socio-economic shift in Ziro. There was a lot of change but there was a lot of change and a lot of like activity that was happening in Ziro because of the festival. But so as we have constantly tried to work with the community, we started working. I started thinking more about how we could like involve the local community even more than just them being a part of the production and volunteering part of the festival. And that is when the idea of really creating more opportunities to bring in and connect the local community to the festival happened. So in 2018, we partnered with a college. We started our first residencies, workshops. There was free entry for children under 12, and a lot of other things happened around this time because of the festival. Can we go to the next slide? So as I was just saying, it was only in 2018 that we started working a lot more on how to engage creatively with the local community and so we've been looking at more participatory art projects to work with the festival, and I have a few examples of what we've done to connect with the community. And if we can just go to the next slide to just show a few pictures. So this is our second sustainable design residency where we had 2 Finnish designers textile designers come in to work with the festival to learn from our local artisans on how to create, how to work with bamboo, because that was something that they had never worked with before. But at the same time, while they were learning from our local artisans, we also teamed them up with students from St. Claret College and gave the students an opportunity to come in and take away something from these designers. And so, being an eco-friendly festival, they were working with waste fabric to create this beautiful space of where all these things were handmade by these students under the direction of the Finnish designers. And can you go to the next slide? And actually, yeah, and as you can see, like one of the participants has even written that it was a very interesting and engaging workshop, and they got to use their hands, and it was the first time seeing the creations come to life, which really gives ownership to people of the valley, just being able to work on the festival ground to produce the festival creatively as well. Next slide, please. So as a part of the Ziro Literary Festival, which is a very, it's a festival that's aimed at the college, at students of the college. And I mean, panel discussions and talks are just not interesting enough for students. And so we started Okay, this one, yeah. So we made sure that workshops became like the biggest things of the festival, and so we had like a graphic novel workshop, a zine workshop, many workshops during the festival, and I love what some of the students ended up saying. And basically what I'm trying to say is that creative engagement is a program where we are trying to bring creative arts to people, to these communities that don't really have access to it unless, and yeah, so that is where I'm coming from. I know I'm out of time, so I'm just going to end there.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. You know, I mean, I think it's really incredible because it's one of the few festivals in India that's so beautifully integrated with the community. So actually, my question to you, Lubna, and I would request you actually to go back to some of the questions and answer, because a lot of them were themed around digital audiences and of course funding. But in your case, my question was especially with community-led or other community-owned festivals where communities have a stake, what kind of complexities have you encountered around money making? Like if Ziro Festival ends up getting some revenue, what is the decision that you take around as a group of people take around sharing what with the community? Has there been questions that has been asked at any point? Do people see this as a way for making more money for themselves? What about, you know, the supplementary benefits to people, including tourism and things of that sort? So I'd like to understand the notion of money, or rather the question of money in this, after which we'll have to close, but that one question for sure.
You know, the funding that's coming in right now is, and there's no question of anybody making a profit out of like the money that's coming in, because everything that's coming in has to go back into the festival. Like the ability to be able to do a little bit more for the community through these workshops and residencies is, I mean, it's a huge cost. And the music festival itself, bringing in international artists and artists from even like locally, is a huge cost. So, but with the limited amount of funding that we have, we try to like give back to the community and create more opportunities for them. So at the moment, there is no question. Those questions haven't even cropped up. But I think that the way we've been working, like the only natural way for us to really like grow would probably be to become a society and work in that sort of a way, because I don't see how else it's going to work, because I mean the ethos and the understanding of all the members of the collective are to give back to society, you know. So I think that's where we're at, and ideally that's where we should go towards.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Rashmi, and to all of our speakers. I know we've had a few technical hitches today, which is why we've gone a bit over our time. So apologies for sticking with us if you're still watching online as part of the webinar. And again, thank you to the fabulous speakers for sharing your knowledge and your insights so generously this evening. And for all of our viewers online for joining us and asking so many thoughtful and considered questions as well. We hope you found it useful. We'll be preparing to have some more of these sessions over the coming months to come as a way of making sure that we all stay connected. I'm going to end with one final thank you and then a poem or two. Well, one poem and then nothing further. So thank you to the British Council Arts team, to our comms team and colleagues across the organisation for really helping us pull this together. And really a big thanks to the Artex team for helping us go beyond the call of duty with what we were doing originally to making this happen as a digital version of what was originally going to be face-to-face. So big thanks to the team and to my fabulous colleagues. And now to end in these testing times, maybe some words that will give us some context and some heart. And also apt care of the fact we've had two festivals from Kolkata today. Poem called Where the Mind is Without Fear by Tagore, who will need no more introduction. The mind is without fear, and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depths of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father. Let my country awake. Let's all stick with that. Over to you, Rashmi.
Thanks once again, Jonathan. Thank you so much for that. Quick thank you to all our speakers. A digital applause to all of you. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for bearing with our repeated requests for tests and PPTs and all of that. I think this was deeply enriching. I've come back with a lot of incredible ideas and thoughts and ways of working, challenging even our own work of the way we look at building something, you know, whether it's with a community or just by ourselves. So a big thank you to all our speakers. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all our team members. Komal Shah, Jonathan, of course, Dipti, Yadhu Krishnan, Rian, Vain, Shanali, Pooja, Tripti, Mahua, Paramita, Roshni, Sonam Shetty, all of you Artex and British Council teams. I'd like to thank our venue partners who we were supposed to do these events with, but it wasn't possible. So the National Museum of Indian Cinema and the Films Division in Mumbai, the Common Room in Delhi, and the Social Indiranagar in Bangalore. And of course, the British Council in Kolkata, where we couldn't hold it eventually. But we hope to be back live soon. In the meantime, you will be able to see us online. We will be taking the webinars, more Festival Connections webinars online. We're going to come back to you with which one the next, but I think the one that seems to be strongly emerging, I feel, is the pivot to digital and funding and fundraising during this time. So maybe those are the two key themes that we'll pick up. But I think it'd be really helpful if you could come back and share with us your thoughts on what topics you'd like us to pick, particularly now over the next 4 to 5 months when we've got time to think about pivoting, new strategies, new ways of working. Please share with us your thoughts and we'll try and incorporate and create these kind of sessions around them. I can promise you they'll be content rich. They'll have some of the best speakers in the country and some of the most progressive festivals in the country. So that is something that we can assure you of. I'm going to skip over the quick updates, but I know the British Council is planning a ton of online events and activities. You will find it online. Please check it out. This weekend is the 5 Films for Freedom screenings and the LGBTQ activists and web panel, which is coming up for the British Council. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you audience members for staying on this long. We will be sharing with you a feedback link. Please fill it up so that we're able to get a sense of how this session worked for us and what changes do we need to make. Share your email IDs with us if you haven't already. Good luck, have a good evening, and stay safe. Thank you.